Okay, it's 6:30. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to order. And the first item on the agenda is setting of the meeting agenda. Are there any changes, additions, Mike?
And President, managers, no changes or additions.
Okay. I'll just make note that after the summary of board direction, we will be going into a private session to finalize the addendum or approve the addendum on the compensation package as a result of Mike's review earlier.
That's after what?
After the summary of board direction, it should only take a couple of minutes. We already approved the package. This is just the addendum to his contract. He is a contract employee. And so we're going to start handling this as an addendum each year to the contract, as we should have been doing.
I move that we accept the agenda.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next is the consent agenda with the two meeting minutes from June 7th and June 25th.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the public open forum, and I see one visitor. Would you like to address the board?
No, I wouldn't. No, I'm here for a different matter.
Okay, very good, thank you. All right, being no other people present, we will close the open forum. Next is the Citizens Advisory Committee update. I don't think we've had a meeting since the last. Didn't we take care of that in our earlier meeting?
No, Madam President, managers, we have had a meeting, and
The CAC meeting was on the 10th. I believe the last board meeting was on the 12th.
Well, yeah.
The CAC notes from that meeting will be in the next board packet.
Okay, Jerry was at our meeting and so gave us the verbal, so our formal minutes will be with the next one. Okay, thank
Correct.
you. Okay, complaints, compliments, requests from the public.
Madam President, managers, this is sort of a piece in transition with the discussion about having a special item on the agenda to cover this. Typically, a number of items that would perhaps go into a category like this are in the administrator's report or listed elsewhere. And so at my request, I did have Aaron put together sort of some additional pieces of the permitting side, because that really has been very voluminous in terms of our activity in recent months, I guess, given the surge in construction activity has more than kept staff busy in this realm. As far as creating an outline or something, I mean, I guess I just would like some feedback from the board as to what we might be looking for in this. We do have another area at the bottom of the agenda, a summary of board direction. Again, not the same, but it does cover some of the similar materials. We do, of course, keep some kind of log or track, these types of things internally. And it's a matter of, maybe the one thing we don't is compliments, but we could make a point of doing that more frequently. Otherwise, complaints and requests typically go into the administrator's report, but I understand that gets fairly lengthy at 5 or 6 pages now, typically, and so we could come up with a similar, maybe tracking thing. I'm kind of thinking about the board summary piece, that maybe we would do something along that line, and not necessarily just highlight permit inspections, because that could be nothing short of a book these days. But and as appropriate, we would keep the board abreast of activities. And I will note on that side of it, we've had very, very good support from the city staffs in terms of collaboration and working together to get a lot of sites into compliance, especially after some of these huge rain events that we've had.
Mike, I apologize to the board for this, but I thought we were going to add that with the administrator report because it was so heavy on the permit side. So I just breezed right by that. I think it makes more sense to do it with your report because you've got all of the other permits this time anyway. So if the board is agreeable, I would like to move that down to 9A as part of the admin report. There's just too many things that are side by side with the report. So is that okay
Yeah.
with everyone? Okay. Steve, are you in agreement to move it down there? Okay. All right, so we'll move 6 down to the administrator report under 9A.
It won't get as much attention though, will it? It wasn't a.
Oh, yeah, it will. I mean, it's like an addendum. That's where I left when you and I were talking about it. I thought we were going to just leave that as an addendum. So let's move on then to 7, new business and the AIS update.
Madam President, managers, for the AIS updates, if you just want to take a quick look there. I guess mostly of note, Steve McComas was out on Forest Lake yesterday, and very good response to the treatments for flowering rush. He was very impressed with the results thus far. And also, in addition, we did get an inquiry, or really more than an inquiry, a citizen that came in and asked if we were aware that, or they thought there was some purple loosestrife in the area of the Aqua Marina, or Aqua Restaurant rather, excuse me. And so turned out that Steve McComas was coming into town, and I asked him then to take a look. And so as a part of his other work that he was out on the lake for, you can see the map, and it turns out that there really is more infestation than we thought. So then some of the smaller areas, we may consider eradication options or treatments. The others may be in the control category. But we'll connect with, I did send this today to the Lake Association, so they're aware of it, and we would probably coordinate what we might want to do there. And of course, we'll also see what our budget can allow for, but I know we have some funds remaining in the unspent area of the curlyleaf pondweed. So other than that, we're still tracking on I did ask staff a little bit more detail about our boat launch inspection program. We will maybe want to do a couple of things, going forward. I think that I may be inclined to see if we can't get one more inspector for the remaining months, a couple of months, if somebody's, because we have a couple that are like half-time. And then we have a couple that'll be leaving, going back to school about the 3rd week of August. And the other one is just really communicating again with Chisago County and their staff. We're still having the same difficulty about getting them on the weekends, So I'm disappointed with the outcome of the hours dedicated to just weekend time frames that we've requested. And so I think I'll work with Susanna up there and try to correct it, at least for the next, for the rest of the summer. But I think really next year, we may want to just really consider, we're already going through the process of doing some hiring for weekend stuff, and maybe pull back a position or something and use those funds to just hire our own and get them more dedicated to the summer, or to the weekends.
Are they doing anything different with advertising?
No, it's not they have the positions. Of course, across the board, everybody was late in trying to get people. We've made several offers for the seasonal tech positions, and before we actually got one that was available, after they had initially interviewed or sent in materials, because the job market is tight. So they were not at full capacity until the latter part of June, I think it was, or middle of June. But it's really still a matter of the way that they do their scheduling. So it's not a staffing capacity on their side, it's a matter of scheduling the hours on the weekends. The majority of the hours that are covering the weekends are our staff.
So the people volunteer, or the people signing up don't want to work weekends, is that?
Right, because they're doing 40 hours a week typically, or something along that line, so they're more the full-time people. And so they're, I mean, we have very directly, and I meant to actually look at the contract to see what the specific language was in there, if there was a component of that that somewhat required that, but, you know, certainly early on when we have staff meetings and such with them, they know that we want, you know, a certain percentage of their time allocated for the weekends. The other thing maybe on the zebra mussel plates, so we are ordering new ones and we'll get them out. And then what we'll probably do with the existing ones is try a different method of cleaning, then put a few of them out side by side with the new ones to see if there's any change in the performance. But by and large, at this point, we think that all of them that are out there have been subject to, I guess, contamination from the chemicals, and so they're not performing.
And do we have plates in Bone Lake?
Yes.
Okay, and nothing has appeared though, right?
Well, right, but
Part
they're
of the
not
problem is the
on any of
cleaning.
them because
But
of-
we haven't had reports of anything on docks or
correct.
boats or
Yeah.
anything like that, okay.
Just as a suggestion to staff, if when we buy these plates, I would check with the vendor to make sure, or at least till we know whether the plates are coming from their same vendor or have they switched vendors? Because if you switch vendors on material like that, it could have a dramatic effect on the type of service that's there. So we should just know that as another variable that we want to be careful of.
Well, the vendor we bought them last time was PLM. They're literally making them in the shop out of materials that you can just buy at a hardware store. So we're now buying them from another person
Okay.
that works for another watershed district, doing this on the side, same materials. And it's all just hand cut, you know, and pieced together, so.
I just have a couple.
Are the plates in Bone Lake, are those plates that have been used and cleaned with chemicals already?
Correct, all of them, we brought them back and we thought it was better to clean them, you know, just to get whatever off and then to put them back out there, but apparently just that little bit of residual chemical on it from the cleaner is keeping them away from all of the plates on all of the lakes, even the ones that we know are infested, so they're not functional.
Just a couple of comments I have on the Forest Lake narrative. The plant harvester has been operating since beginning of July. I'd raised a point about doing what we can to stop the spreading of the zebra mussels as they attach to that plant material that's kicked off by the harvester. So have we looked at doing anything? Is the city maybe doing more collecting of that material at the dam, the Sunrise Dam?
No, but, I mean, just from casual observation, I've not really observed enough for collecting.
Okay. Where's the harvesting taking place primarily?
It's taking place primarily in the channels between the lake, if it's needed, and then also in the back bays, you know, getting in and out of the bays. There's an issue with shallow water and weeds getting in there, so that's usually kept open, and they sometimes back in the bay, there's some issues. So it's pretty far from the exit of the lake, is where it's happening.
Is there a lot of activity in Basin 1 with the harvester, just in the?
The harvester is only being operated right between Lake 1 and 2 and then into the bay, and that's prevailing winds of the northwest or southwest, so it's not even blowing that direction.
All right.
We also have, maybe 2 years ago, so there was a change in the way it was being used. One is now it's city staff only, so there's no more volunteers, so they can't stray. But we've also given them routes or areas from the permitting side, and we had a GPS unit installed to verify their locations. So similar to the street sweeper, so we could track it.
Okay. And then on Comfort Lake, we have been noticing, as was reported to me, that the curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian milfoil are intermingled now in the denser patches. So they're growing together, and the milfoil is kind of wrapping around the curly leaf. So I thought I should report that, so you can tell Steve to be on the lookout for this. Bill Kilty was the source.
Right, so the curly leaf should be long dead already. I mean, it's gone,
It was a couple weeks ago.
unless it's a different pondweed, a native
Could be.
perhaps. No.
It could be, but it's winding itself around something. And maybe it's the northern. Okay, I think that was all of my notes. John, were you able to go to that pulling in the lake seminar? Yeah, we were out of town, so I wasn't either. Wayne, did you
make
go
it.
on Bone Lake?
No,
Steve
it was
McCombs,
the
okay.
night that we had a meeting,
Okay,
so
okay.
actually, the meeting ended up getting canceled, but I was already, was on my way before I got the message.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think I was interested in what happened there, because you had 12 people at Bone Lake, which is a pretty good turnout, but there wasn't mention of how many turned out at Comfort Lake.
Yeah.
And neither was there any kind of reporting of how many pounds or how much was pulled out.
I think it was more of a demonstration.
Right, it was, the events were more a training
Okay.
piece.
And selection of rakes, it sounded like they were trying out different kinds of rakes.
Yeah,
And they made a choice of a particular rake that they're getting from a source.
maybe getting a good price on it,
Right,
so,
right.
so residents can buy it. The point of that was to teach people how
How to do it,
take
okay.
care of their own property. And
Okay.
then if you've got everybody doing that, then you've got the whole lake covered.
Understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next is the permit 18-017 Third Lake Estates.
Madam President and managers, I want to present a permit for Third Lake Estates. You have the Greg Rasky's engineer's report, and I believe the applicant is in
Yes,
the
Dave.
audience.
Okay, welcome, thank you.
Jessica, did you want to pull up Google Earth?
Pardon?
So Jessica will pull up a Google Earth image just to put this into perspective on Forest Lake. So the proposed development is located just on the north side of 224th Street, on the north side of the first basin.
Correct.
And so you can see it's just, put some context, that the large wetland complex to the north has been part of some past district studies. FL 44 is what we've been calling it in the past. But, so you can see where the existing home situates, and then when we move to the plan set, you'll see where the proposed 10 homes will be situated. And maybe if you can zoom in on that, might be a little close. So it's just the plan set for the proposed development. You can see it's a cul-de-sac next to the existing home with 10 proposed houses. This triggered our rules for stormwater management, erosion control, and also wetland buffer requirements.
Which one is the existing home, just so I have a context?
I believe that's in the southeast corner
Okay.
of the property.
There.
Oh, there we go, okay, thanks.
So just going to walk you through the image. So you can see, on the far northern part of the plan set, the green shading shows the existing wetland.
That's
So-
what we call FL 44 in the striped area?
Correct,
Okay,
FL 44, it's that southern portion of that. It's a very large complex.
okay,
So to meet the stormwater management rules for both rate, volume, and then water quality, basically what you can see if we scroll down a little bit further, the 10 homes in the cul-de-sac. So the drainage from the street and the driveways and all the frontage of the homes are routed by that blue pipe into a stormwater ponding area in the northeast. And the soil boring shows some clay soil, so it's actually biofiltration. We've seen some of that in the permits, with a filtration branch around the edge of the stormwater pond. And then that is routed north, once it goes through that biofiltration filter, to the wetland. And so there's stabilization that needs to occur for the outlet into the wetland. That's part of the plan set, and the erosion control, which we'll get to later. But hydrologic modeling was performed, so most of the runoff goes through that northeast stormwater pond. There's also for the backyards, some of the drainage flows west, so it's been routed to the northwest corner as part of some recent changes to the plan to meet the stormwater requirements. And this is actually just an infiltration basin, so the conditions allow, and there's room to put an infiltration basin there.
What is that big vertical purple stripe? Is that additional treatment?
The horizontal
Yeah.
purple,
Oh, I
that
said
is,
vertical. I meant
that is
horizontal.
showing, once we get to the wetland rule, number 4,
Okay.
that is the 50-foot required buffer.
Okay.
That's part of the proposed plan. So in terms of the hydrologic modeling, for both the 2 discharge points into the 2 ponding areas, there needs to be no increase in rates from pre-development at each of those points of discharge, and so actually the modeling shows a decrease in rates, so it meets our rules. In terms of volume, from the increase in the impervious surface, they need to not increase from pre-development for that 24-hour precipitation event. So because the northeast pond is biofiltration, they have the correction factor, so they're actually treating more volume than our rules required, and that biofiltration basin meets the required volume. So all that additional volume from the impervious surface needs to be reduced, and that meets the requirements through that feature. And then also in the northwest corner, that basin, there's a large area of footprint. So the infiltration basin is proposed to meet the volume reduction requirements for the backyard, but that is one of the stipulations of the permit. We're waiting for some updated modeling just to show that it meets the volume requirements, but it was our engineer's opinion, just based on the size, that should be able to meet those requirements. It was one of the more recent changes, just to keep this project moving, so. And then in terms of water quality, all the additional volume is treated. That satisfies the district rules. There's pretreatment for both of those basins to remove sediment prior to the ponding areas. And then all the rooftop areas have plenty of sheet flow before it reaches the wetland, so their sediment's removed to the maximum extent practical there as well. They've submitted their stormwater pollution prevention plan with their construction schedule. In terms of wetland levels in FL44, the size of this site and all the volume discharge is negligible compared to how large that wetland is. So there'll be no bounce in the wetland. And then Greg Rossi reviewed the grading and the floor plans to make sure that we meet the freeboard requirements with that wetland. So rule number 2 is met, pending just some of that additional modeling to confirm the size of that northwest pond. In terms of rule 3 for erosion control, they submitted detailed erosion control plans. So you can see on this plan set, silt fencing is shown in behind the homes in the yellow line and around the constructed ponding areas. At the outlet of the northeast pond, they have some erosion control blankets and riprap for protection, and then at the entrance of the site, they have their rock construction entrance. So that meets the district requirements, and they have their revegetation specifications, implementation schedule. And then again, for rule number 4, they submitted wetland delineation and MinRam report. It's a managed 2 wetlands, so that requires a 50-foot buffer. That's part of the proposed development. It's currently wooded. It'll remain wooded. There shouldn't be any disturbance except for that outlet pipe from the northeast pond. And so part of the permit requirements is to make sure that any disturbed area is revegetated with an appropriate seed mix. So that meets the other wetland buffer requirements. So the recommendation is to approve this permit. There's a series of 8 stipulations prior to issuing the actual permit, meeting some of those things I just mentioned. First, the revegetation specifications and that updated hydrologic modeling for that northwest basin, just to make sure we satisfy the district requirements, our maintenance instruments, our buffer protection instruments being recorded with the county. There's an additional permit fee in the amount of $1,500 that we still need to collect for the wetland buffer. One thing in terms of The permit application, we just want to make sure that the correct people are signing it at the first go-round, so we just want to do some confirmation of property ownership. And then financial assurance for the grading and alteration. And then the last piece is to calculate the financial insurance for the stormwater facilities. We need that engineer's estimate for that cost, but we're still waiting on that because, of course, that pond has to go through the final H&H modeling. So, yes, and then the stipulations of the permit, once it's issued, is buffer markers to be placed in that wetland buffer, and then submittal of an as-built survey.
How long do you anticipate all of these stipulations to be completed?
The engineer is probably working on them this week. And then, we should have something out hopefully midweek next week.
Great.
Yeah, that would be the plan. I do have a couple of questions, or I guess I'm looking for some help and understanding. They call the site to be 7.25 acres, and I think the fee is based on disturbed acreage. So if that's not all disturbed acreage, how does that work?
For the grading and alteration for those fees?
Yeah, because,
that-
it's a very heavily wooded lot.
Yep.
And, when we worked with the city on this, and the first time we met with the Watershed, we don't want to take down any more trees than we have to, because uprooting them, taking them out, loosens all that dirt. And actually, 3 of the lots will be kind of a custom grade lot where they'll take out minimum, so when someone comes to build a house there, the house will have a little bit of tweaking and design for that lot. And part of that was due to that I did a plan unit development rider on this, so we could tip that cul-de-sac a little bit. So some of the lots are like 23,000 square feet versus 25, and things of that nature, because it made nicer lots. So, once they mark that tree buffer, if it turns out to be 5.9 or whatever, is there an adjustment, or how would that be handled?
So it's based on, you're correct in terms of about 2,000 per acre. So that's something maybe you could follow up with Greg Grasky.
Okay.
About in terms of, he can show
Yeah.
you what he was assuming for that disturbed area.
Gotcha.
So you
I will
can compare
work-
notes for
I
that.
will work with Greg on that. And then the other thing is the easement recording order. They want those easements recorded prior to a final plat that's gonna be recorded? Or does everybody just give their blessing on it and we go to record at one time? Because I don't know how you could record something without having something to verify it, like a final plat.
For the easement.
That's maybe,
For the buffer maintenance declaration, I believe.
yeah,
What was that? For the buffer?
For the buffer maintenance declaration stuff.
So would there not be a final plat forthcoming prior to?
well, there would be a final plat, yeah. But I don't know how you could record an easement on a plat that hasn't been recorded. I'm just thinking with 30 years of experience in the real
Right.
estate business and understanding title work, how that might work, or maybe that's just some details we have to work out. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can
Yeah, okay,
discuss that with.
yeah,
I think it would be a matter that the board, the approval would be conditional on all
Okay.
the elements. And then, so once the plat is approved, and then we can record against that.
Sure.
And then you'd get your permit.
Yeah.
The final
It-
plat.
yeah, okay, the final plat,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
That makes sense, because then one instrument's in place.
That's correct.
The other one lays on top and verifies.
yeah.
And so, after that happens, how quick is the permit issued? A day, a 2-day, a week?
The way it works here is when the board gives the conditional approval, pending all of these items
Yep.
being met, the administrator has the authority then to issue the permit.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of
All
It's
right,
up to you.
getting the information
Okay.
into the office, and they verify that everything's there, and then
all right,
it could be
Yeah,
hours.
once we get them, I would say they're typically turned around within a day.
great,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
I think of going back to the first question, though, Madam President, Board, I think that for the calculation, we would assume, once you have the permit, we don't know how much you would
No,
disturb, so it would probably would have been calculated as to the maximum extent
Gotcha.
allowable whether you did it or not. So I would presume that's probably the way it was calculated,
Okay,
So-
well, we can
but I
take a
don't,
look at that when it all
Right.
comes to par,
yeah.
okay?
Madam President, Managers, just a couple of questions. And I apologize, because we used to have pretty good coordination meetings with the city, and then with the administrator leaving, those have kind of been gone by the wayside, so we don't always talk about some of these things, but, and this didn't occur to me till just now. Is the city taking over these ponds?
Yes.
Okay, is that in, do we have anything in there that,
I don't
along
think
that
it's
line?
been noted.
So,
That was one of the concerns the city had is, well, how come there's 3 ponds? The city engineer, Ryan, thought maybe, the 2 would be suffice. And then the one to the northwest there is really a shallow drift to catch that before it hits which makes sense. Not only cost effectiveness, but,
Sure.
yeah.
And then, I also, I've reviewed the drawing here, but I didn't think about the street and down farther. Is the city doing anything with that street?
224th will be a shape and pave.
Okay,
Yeah, so then in the southwest corner, or actually, adjacent to my house, that's where that catch basin will be for everything that comes down. And then it hits the overflow and sends it back to the infiltration pond.
okay. Because
Yeah.
down along the lake, we've
Yeah.
had ongoing complaints from one of the residents. They, basically, everything comes down that side street around, on the east side, then goes down.
Irish, yeah,
Right, and
yeah,
then,
and the blacktop will come from where that stops, my property, line, and continue up. It'll extend maybe 20 feet past that, so it's all blacktop and ties in.
okay.
But that's been, I'm sure that's been a concern, because if you drive around the lakes, you see all those stub streets, and especially when you get towards over towards the log cabin, all those stub streets stop and it runs right into the lake. And the other day when I drove around, just from where the dam is, there's 7 or 8 drainage ditches that come underneath the road all the way to 97, and that sheds all that impervious surface water there, and nothing's treated, so it's kind of the old,
We're familiar with that. so
yeah, I'm sure,
it's-
so that, it's,
I would, yeah, because I was just wondering that if the city was planning to do anything in that area, then we should make note that they try to address that during their reconstruction, if they're doing that.
yeah, and I don't know where you would stop that water. We'll pick everything up from the property lines.
Right.
And put it into that, it'll be able to shed into that front area, and then it will hit the overflow
Yeah, that'll help.
and shift, that'll take care of that, yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
You said 3 treatment ponds. I only see 2. What am I missing?
Oh, if you move the plat forward. Right where you see the blue pipe on 224th there?
Yeah.
In that pocket? No, shrink it down.
Down.
Right there, yeah. It's not a ponding, it's just more or less a catch basin for the impervious surface.
Okay.
That might come down the hill and not get picked up,
Ah,
and then off the street on 224th. So then it catches there, and then it'll have a overflow, so what won't saturate will shed back into the
into that pond on the.
yeah, northeast corner, yeah.
Northeast corner.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now I get it. Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve permit application 18-017, with the conditions that are on the EOR memo. Was there gonna be another condition? I saw you writing something down. Was there any other conditions?
No additional conditions.
Okay, all right.
I would just recommend that we add following, to number 3, following final plat approval. Because we'll get that to review after the final, or
Following.
before the final plat review, actually.
All right.
So we'll approve, and then it'll go back to the city for that final. So I would just add that, because that was a concern of yours, and just so everybody's clear
Okay,
on number 3.
in my
Okay.
motion.
Okay, so that will be added to your motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam President, thank you, Council.
Okay. Next item is wetland bank scoping, work plan, and scope.
Madam President, managers, we discussed this a little bit during the budgeting session a couple days ago. There is an area that the property that the district owns along the Sunrise there, coming out of Himes Lake, this tax forfeiture property. And in review of the number of possible sites for potential banking, wetland banking, this was probably the most beneficial or the most likely place where we could get it. And then also, because we own it, the one that we could be the shortest route to accomplishing that. We also would need this kind of work and in the short order to establish whether or not, if we were going to go after a Clean Water Fund grant, whether or not we have an area to do some pretreatment, because that's the one element of the last grant application that was missing, is that we did not have a pretreatment for the wetland treatment portion. As such, the work would serve two purposes. And once we get the results, the board can deliberate more about whether or not which option they want to choose, go after the Clean Water Fund grant. The applications are closer to the end of August this year versus the early part, or go after the wetland bank. We know that presently Menards is submitting an application for wetland impacts, and this is in the Comfort Lake drainage area. This probably at this point could have been used for that. It won't be, but we also know it's not likely to be the last impact of wetlands in that drainage area. So the board may consider that after that time, but it is staff recommendation to pursue this, work on this order, or at least in this time frame. If there's any other questions.
Yep, I do. I don't fully understand this concept. Maybe you can help me better understand. We have stormwater central treating goals, right? Trying to develop a central stormwater area. So this is a similar type concept, but with wetlands?
Correct. So they are completely separate though, but they're similar in concept. So we're talking about a regional stormwater pond, and then that we could, in theory, sell credits to developers or to the city or others in order to meet our stormwater rules. In parallel are the WACA rules, so the state wetland rules that the city enforces here locally for Forest Lake. Under those rules, if there's going to be an impact for filling in particular, they have to go out and buy credits. We always look at or staff and everyone else that reviews these applications looks at the service area, and it's a fairly large geographic area, so this would encompass a lot of Chisago County and area, for a wetland available for purchase. There are 0 acres available. So presently, then they have to go out of the service area to buy them, but at a different ratio.
And buy, you mean at a certain cost per pound of phosphorus, or how?
Nope, per acre, and we're talking typically about,
So 1 for 1 then, basically?
nope, they're, for 1 acre of impact, you're talking about 2 or 2.5 acres of purchase. And normally
So
those
they would have to pay us the value of the wetland that we own?
whatever the market would be. So, I mean, to a degree, we could establish what that price is, but
Okay.
but we're currently talking about something about $80,000 to $100,000 per acre.
Okay. So what about then, it says wetland restoration. Is this wetland needs to be restored, or is it got an issue with it? Do we know that? We haven't done any testing on it, have we?
Well, just that the ditching that occurs in much of those areas have impacted the wetlands. So, so hydrologically speaking, they're not functioning as a wetland would have.
But they're not impaired, are they?
Well, I would say yes, they are, because many of them also, because they're drained or they were ditched and then farmed. We see a lot of reed canary out there. It's totally dominated the landscape. So one of the things that we might want to consider is removal of, 4 or 5 inches of the surface to get back at the seed bank for the native population, but also just hydrologically kicking that water over into that area, similar to what we did at Bixby Park.
Okay. So then the last question is, does the wetland have to be downstream from where the issue is?
Now, we in theory could have established wetlands anywhere in the district and make them available for sale.
So why is this one preferred over, say, the one around Forest Lake?
We own the property, district.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And it's suitable for restoration, or at least it appears on the very field observation that this is the one that would be potential.
Good, thanks.
And this is the property within the Washington County area, tax forfeit property?
It's just Sagamore County portion,
Okay, so this is the one beyond
north of
the
Archie's.
Archie's, right, the stream that comes from Himes Lake,
Correct,
on the other side of that.
correct.
Okay. And this is to service the entire district, correct? For wetland credits? That's the intention?
Correct. We could, it's also feasible if we have credits available, we could sell them to somebody within the service area outside of the district boundary, but we've have a wetland restored and somebody else has paid for it.
Yeah, well, I think this is too rushed to make a decision on. We had this whole credit banking issue explored very thoroughly by the person that did the assessment on the Archie Ducharme farm when we were looking at that property. And I think we need to refresh ourselves on that process and how it works. My understanding was that you couldn't use a restored site for banking. That they preferred, you know, if it's going to require extensive restoration. They required properties that were more in a natural state and required a little bit of that. But Archie's farm, for example, would not have been a good site because it required way too much restoration. So that was one of the original thoughts that he had, is that his site was going to be so good for wetland credits. The other thing is I'm not aware that the credit issue has been anything that's come up in our watershed. You know, it was my understanding that for a developer to get to the credits, they had to go through, you know, a series of things like we do for any wetland project, so that it's a tiered system. You don't jump right down to the credits.
Correct.
And one of the points that came up earlier, it never made sense to me that you could have a wetland credit bank that was so far from the impacted area. So my thought for our district would make so much sense to me if we created a wetland bank, if we need them, in each of our major lake management districts. And then whatever impact is happening in that lake management district, the bank is right there. So it's offsetting right in the area of impact, the property that needed the bank. The wetland credits, yes.
Madam President, are you talking about?
The land available to you too, though, right?
Right, and there's also, it's quite a time process that normally would not meet a developer's timeline.
But it hasn't been an issue. I mean, this is not a burning issue. Our burning issue for banking is stormwater. You know, we need to have areas that we can use for stormwater treatment.
Correct, but we do have we have one pending. It'll be coming before the board, probably before the end of the year, for a wetland impact. So it's being processed, and we know that they will be purchasing credits outside the district.
And where is it? Where is
The
this
Menards property.
activity? The Menards property?
Mhm.
Okay.
So the concept here is that we take money from someone that's going to be destroying or using a wetland, and then we triple that cost to work on 3 times, create or else restore an area 3 times as large in one of the existing wetlands we have by making it more effective and efficient. I'm trying to look at here the cost per pound that we're gonna be getting out of this whole thing. I mean, I use cost per pound of phosphorus,
Right.
as just a generic measure, and I'm sure there's something else, but we had that measure with Moody Lake when we restored those wetlands. So,
Yes, but that really was for a different purpose and function. So, and that rehabilitation was really excavation. So in this particular case, so we know for the Clean Water Fund grant, I'm not sure it'd be worth staff effort to put forth the grant application for the same thing without the necessary field investigation work that needs to be accomplished to determine the wetland delineation portion of, is there land available that's not wetland that we can manipulate for pretreatment? So at some level, that work would have to be done. And then from the banking side, which is another option, if we were to acquire this information and this report from a district engineer, would be that then the district could consider what the restoration of that would be. It would probably encompass a high flow bypass, kicking the water over into that property area, creating a berm along the south side of it and making it, go through the property or the parcels that we have. And then, so enhance that. It also may be an option for the district to remove some material, but not necessarily in terms of its enhancement. We may be able to just scrape some of the surface and use that to create the berm along the ditch area and keep the water on the north side of it and make it just hydrologically more functional. And that would be, on a relative basis, a simpler restoration, and one that the district could potentially recoup its expenditures, considering the cost, thinking about particularly like Bixby Park, the expense that we had there. And if we're able to sell it on the market for $80,000 to $100,000 an acre, we would have to see how many acres would come out of that. So,
it just seemed to me that a company would pay 3 times the going rate for a part of a wetland that they need. They must need it pretty badly then to do that, right?
Yes.
So how many people actually do that? I mean, just from an economic aspect.
it really depends on the cost of the square foot. I mean,
Yeah.
Menards has nowhere else to go.
Right.
And they're looking at, I mean, when we had the concrete company, Knife River, come in,
So
They-
Menards would either have to buy the wetland or move their store somewhere else to make it bigger. Some kind of trade-off like that.
Well, wouldn't they also, though, be able to treat on-site?
no, what they're talking about is
Wetland.
exact complete fill of the wetland. That has nothing to do with the stormwater requirement. That'll be a completely different discussion that'll come to before the board. The wetland impact will be all long decided before the board has a chance to look at the stormwater piece of it.
So if we don't have this program, and they want to buy that land, then they could actually buy a wetland over in Rice Creek. Correct?
Correct.
Someplace else.
So, like, I'm just rationalizing here, so is that gonna really hurt us as opposed to taking all the money we'd spent on this wetland stuff and actually putting it more into stormwater treatment, which is one of our major problems?
It comes down to this simple element that for every acre that is destroyed is one less acre that you have in the district for treatment. So, I mean, and so then it's a matter of what is the value of that acre of treatment in the broader scheme of things? Or is it from functionality, or is it stormwater, is it phosphorus? You know, what is that value? And that's really a question for the board, I guess. And so as staff, I'm just bringing forth a recommendation that I see in terms of a need that was stated in the plan, and an opportunity that I think is worth at least evaluating. So,
Menards is buying the property behind them, correct, for expansion? Is that what we're talking about, that farm, what used to be a farm behind them?
I don't,
There's
I
a
think it's
wetland on
just
the
a big
side of the parking lot.
swamp in back.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
trying to determine what we're talking about here.
I think it's, well, maybe go to the property viewer and see what they actually own, if you wouldn't mind, Jessica, please. I think that's,
It's on the south side, right? Across from
I
Keys.
think it is. I think that they're just planning to
That's all
expand.
wetland in there if you look at it. When you drive by.
So why aren't they just required to purchase nearby property to do their storm water treatment on site? I'm not understanding why that's not working in that way.
It's not stormwater, this is just wetland. They want to build,
Destroying
They're
wetlands.
destroying
No, I
wetlands.
get that, but where's their water going? Where's their additional storm water going to be going? To Comfort Lake?
Yeah.
Well, they'll have to treat that.
Well, they have to.
Where?
They have to, well, that's the problem. They have to have this filtering of the wetland is already filtering water today. So they destroy that, we lose that. So they gotta replace that somewhere. And that's what, and then everything else is coming right at us, right? I mean, all this stuff is coming eventually to.
so they own behind the store at an angle and then south. They probably have a footprint about twice the size of their current store property. And the vast majority of that footprint is currently wetland. So given their typical expansion, they would probably move this south.
Madam President, managers, they have a letter about their wetland permit, and they talk about underground detention for stormwater treatment. I mean, so that's addressed separately. This is more just,
The wetland.
yeah, the loss of wetland and part of the
Okay.
WACA permitting.
There's what.
Thank you.
A little bit behind and a little bit to the south, or a little bit to the west and south.
What about this Hool property? Is that applicable for wetland credits?
Well, we have discussed this, I have discussed this with the city several times over the course of last year as we were in the process of acquiring it, and specifically as this was being floated that, with the property for Menards. And, well, and just in general, I've told the city staff, particularly the engineer, that if somebody wants to do something, we would gladly collaborate. And oh, by the way, if it's a big box store, another big box store owns this property next to us, but we can't seem to get a hold of the owners. If one big box store could talk to the other big box store, maybe they could help figure out how to do a nice wetland restoration, a bigger project that we've identified. But that never came because frankly, I think it's just easier for them to write a check. At the end of the day, they've got the property and everything, and they're just going through this process, and that's where they're at.
So what I hear staff saying is that this is part of a puzzle that we have a more of a complete picture and program. And so I just want to ask, Laura, based upon your experience with other watersheds, is this something that's kind of another tool that we really should consider, considering the size of our watershed and so forth? Or, I hate to put you on the spot, but I mean, how much is being used like this in terms of as a strategy to?
Well, Madam President, managers, I feel a lot of organizations are thinking more about wetland banking. I know there's Jason Neighbor in our office who put together the memo, is working a lot in St. Louis County on a huge kind of wetland bank credit system. So I think in the past it has been used as much, but this whole issue with, for the WACA permitting, there's these large service areas, and when there's nothing available, recognizing that statewide, we don't have any net loss of wetlands, but locally, I mean, that loss of wetland by the Menards has impacts on our local hydrology. So I think where opportunities arise, it makes sense, and people are putting their land into these wetland bank credits. And as a watershed district, we have to invest up front to restore the wetland, but in the future, when there's more development, I think that's been the discussion as part of the volume retention, then we would have some credits in our own district that could offset very directly, so.
Wasn't Bixby considered possibility for wetland credit banking? I remember reading that. Oh,
Not once we got the Clean Water Fund grant, it was no longer eligible.
okay, that's what it was. All right.
So how
Cecilia?
like,
Cecilia?
I was just gonna say that Browns Creek has initiated this type of thinking and doing wastewater restoration a couple of years ago, right? Browns Creek and Rice Creek has been doing it for a while.
so is Browns Creek, my next question was, how likely is it to have a residential program like the gentleman that was here wants to put some houses up? How likely is it a residential effort to take up a wetland? It's probably too expensive to do that. What's Brown Creek doing? I mean, they got a lot of commercial development going down there right now, too.
Yes, they've made a couple of restoration in the area that is actually draining to the creek, helping, restoring the natural hydrology of the wetland, getting water quality benefit of it, and then getting the credits from when somebody, cannot really do anything on the side, they just need to, like, when ours need to go, then be able to sell those credits to them.
Why this property, Mike, instead of the tax forfeit property in Washington County?
Well, the tax forfeiture property,
We've got two parcels in Washington.
right. Hydrologically, it gets a lot more complicated because you have the channel from Bixby Park coming through the one area, and then the Sunrise coming through the other. So the district engineer, through the Sunrise study, has already completed a preliminary design on this one coming out of Himes Lake. And it was also part of that was part of the rationale for using it for the Clean Water Fund application last year, is that we had already done a lot of the background work of calculating the benefit previously. So it was sort of there. It's in terms of what we know. So I mean,
I'm thinking about the one closest to Highway 8, though, that the river doesn't run through that. That's a lateral ditch that was put in to drain the ag field, or to drain that field for ag purposes, and the city's using it for stormwater. As you make that turn around 8, it's that first lateral.
So what do we own?
let me see.
What do we own?
There's a tax, where, can
think
you
you
move
should
the
move
map
to the right.
down a little bit? Yeah.
More to the right. No, yeah, because isn't it,
It has to go down a little bit first.
Are
and
you
then
talking
go-
along Highway 61?
Move it down. There we go. A little bit further. And 61, we need to get over to 61.
yeah, to the
Like
right of
Steve said.
61.
Yeah, there we go.
This is what you want,
That's what I want.
right.
So
Yeah. So here's the Sunrise River over to the right, and then this lateral that's coming right here. I don't know, maybe it's about an inch or so.
Madam President,
and
Jessica,
a half or so.
do you have the property viewer up again, please? If you go in that same area, so their district
There we
has
go.
3 parcels. So if you, just east of 61 and north of Highway 8, Jessica, if you would please, right there. Okay, that's one. And then if you go farther north again, a little bit, pull down, then there's 2 more. There's that really odd-shaped one right there, and then that corner one to the upper left, right there.
There we go.
Those are the 3 we own.
So when we look at those in terms of trying to get water and restore functionality, they're a lot more complicated, and they don't. Well, we have not done anything to evaluate that lower one, but trying to get the water over there. You've got another private parcel in between that city one and the district property. I mean, if the district wanted to pursue some acquisition, either an easement or purchase, that would probably be a better project. But then we may want to do that just for our stormwater project. Because that was the area that Greg had identified at the previous meeting. So that narrow one, a little bit farther to the east.
Well,
for-
What was that first property you were talking about? Was that little building at the end? down in the southern part of this area? Or what were you talking about acquiring?
No, that between the long skinny triangle that the city owns,
Yeah.
between 8 and 61. If you pan over a little bit to the right there, Jessica, right there, that one,
Yep.
yep. So the city of Forest Lake owns that one.
Okay.
And then the district owns that other parcel there to the west. But then there's a private party that owns the one in between.
Okay,
So we would need to work out something with them. Not saying we can't, start that process and have a conversation with them. Then it would be a much bigger and better project.
okay, so you're looking at a bigger impact for the bank, or a bigger site, I mean.
Right, and we're eyeing that one up, frankly, that area, that has floated to the top
Can you-
as
can
a
you move
stormwater
up
project.
to that other tax forfeit property we own?
That's just Sago County, so it'd be a different map viewer,
Okay,
or property viewer,
But
so,
it's in that
but
area.
that's the area.
Yep.
correct. It's north of that channel, it's that channel is really the boundary. And then,
And so that wetland,
Goes right up
once
to
it's
that house.
restored, this ag field is restored to wetland, it stays wetland. Right? It's basically always going to be a natural site.
correct, well, the majority of that is natural, if you will, so to speak, but just not too many years ago, it was being farmed.
I know, that's what I mean.
So, right, and the primary function of what we're describing, if the conditions are right, is to restore the hydrology to that area.
Okay.
So what would we do, okay, with the property we're talking about here, what would we do different with it if it weren't for wetland banking?
We would probably do the exact same design that we've looked at from the Clean Water Fund grant application. We would put a high flow bypass from east of the Highway 61, kick the water north, and then create a berm along the channel area to keep the water out of the channel, but rather than in that property area. There is enough slope in there to make it effective.
So did this get passed over once for a grant opportunity?
Last year, correct. Because it did not have any pretreatment.
Okay.
So we're talking about removing it from that type of a plan and converting it to wetland.
Well, in
Well, it
either
would
case,
be.
it would both be wetland. It would just be whether or not, one would be for the purpose of reducing phosphorus and treatment. The other would simply be for the purpose of developing a bank that the district could sell. Financially, you're probably about the same.
Which couldn't be used then for phosphorus reduction, is that what you're
No, it
saying?
can, yeah.
Okay, so you've got two benefits then.
And that scenario, right, but at some point, you still need a buyer, but given the fact that there are 0 acres in
Well,
Area 6.
my point though is that if we were going to have more of a ponding system there for rate control and sedimentation benefits and so forth, but if it's restored to a wetland, we are preserving the natural habitat, restoring natural wetland, which it was before it became a farm years ago, and it can be used for a credit bank. And the bank is going to be in the same major watershed district as the activity, because Menard's site is in the Comfort Lake Management District. So we're achieving a lot of things in that regard. I just, I don't like these big things to be having to make decisions on them so quickly. So if we can have a little bit more time to think about this and go through it, tonight's been a good discussion. So I think that if we're going to achieve the benefits that I just described, then giving it up as or losing that ability to have it as a wetland, more pond kind of a thing with more stormwater benefit, we have other properties in the same area and vicinity that we can use for that purpose.
But I think eventually all this does is spends $10,000 to help us assess whether this even is a candidate from us.
Just
So I
a
think we're not gonna have any more information 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now unless we do some additional investment. So I think, if we're gonna move this thing along, to me, it seems like most of the commercial development on wetlands is gonna be done in the city area right around this side of town, unless somebody wants to build a big residential complex and buy a wetland at 3 times the value of the, and I don't see that happen too much. So I think this looks like it fits right together where we have to have it. Plus, it helps Comfort Lake, too.
Well, that's what I just said. Cecilio, you had your hand up?
Just a very, trying to clarify maybe the concept. In order to get the maximum water quality benefit of the restoration, the best way to do it is to restore it to the wetland, similar to what we did for Bixby.
Mhm.
Okay. The only difference is that if we do that with ground money, then we save the money, and we don't have any credits for it. If we don't use the ground money, then we do it with our own money. I mean, the result is exactly the same, it's restoring the wetland exactly the same. Then we have the ability to be able to sell those credits.
And that's a good thing if you have buyers.
Correct. Yes.
And that's what concerns me, because I've not heard this issue come up before. And if this was a real hot commodity, you'd hear more about it. Now, Mike, you said you had some, you had heard some interest in wetland banking, is that correct?
Well, I mean, the district has been a part of the Area 6 service area, I guess, team or consortium. Jason Neighbor has been a regular individual involved with a lot of that. And presently, through the communication of this wetland impact for Menards, they have verified there are 0 acres available. And so I think that, and they don't mind that, the developers, because the price for, way up in northwest Minnesota is a lot less than what we would want to charge and what the market would bear here. But the agencies presently, and of course, rules and laws can always change, but if there are acres available,
In closer proximity, that's
well,
what
within
they-
the service area,
Okay.
then they have to
Yeah.
make a good faith effort to acquire those.
Okay,
those.
so that is something that's controlled by the state, correct? The wetland banks?
Well, you put it in there, but we would still own it, but they,
We own it, but they manage the process at a statewide level, though,
right, and I
correct?
think
Okay.
that,
So we invest the money up front to restore, so that we don't have grant dollars that prohibit us from using it as a wetland bank. And we get the money back 3 times over if that whole property goes to a wetland bank. So,
yeah, I think, so I'm just reading from a document here with relation to the Menards piece that, so they're acquiring this parcel or these wetlands outside of 1.85 acres. And the price is basically $22,000 an acre. And so the seller represents and warrants as follows. The credits are deposited in an account in the Minnesota Wetland Bank administered by the Minnesota Board of Water Soil Resources. And that the seller owns the credits and has the right to sell the credits. So we would be the owner, and then ultimately the seller deposited into the bank managed by Bowser.
yeah, so we're not selling property to have more water put on it, we're selling the value of that replacement. It's kind of a,
Yeah, and we could have Jason come to the next meeting and discuss this. I mean, and the work would just need to be done prior to the end of September, and then the board would really consider it for a future
Yeah.
piece, so.
well, I think if we can pull out that report that was done when the Ducharme property was appraised, he did a very, very thorough job. And then Jason can look at that as well, and we can have that to beforehand so that we can kind of brush ourselves up again on how that works.
Yeah, it would be helpful to understand what makes a good banking system and what doesn't.
Yeah, and how big is that property, again, do we know, that we're looking at?
Well, in total, what the district owns is 20.
No, just that one piece is what I'm talking about, that we're talking about converting to wetland.
This is it.
It's those two parcels.
Those
Of
two
course, there's some
parcels.
upland there where those trees are,
Uh-huh.
in the north and south piece, but that's a 20-acre parcel.
So a total of 20 acres?
No, there's two
Oh,
parcels.
40.
Total acreage is probably 40,
41.7.
yeah, I was gonna say, and so,
So at $22,000 an acre, is that the going rate for a bank?
not around here.
Not around here.
What is
But,
what
and
is
also,
our
we would
going
not
rate?
restore the entire thing. It would, you would have to do, like a pre-assessment, and that's where this work that Jason would be
That's what
doing.
this work is gonna figure out.
Right, it's how much,
Well, how much property are you thinking that it's going to be? You only want to do half of it?
well,
10
you would do
acres
as,
of it?
we would do as much as we can,
Much as we can do.
and frankly,
Going back to those smaller parcels down below, if it's going to be 10 acres or less, how many acres are those smaller parcels down below? In Washington County, the ones that we
Oh.
own?
That one is 7.5.
Okay,
That one's 10.
but,
But you can't do wetland on that whole property because it's
correct,
upland.
right.
And that one's 3.
And even if we have 42 acres in Chisago County, we would not come anywhere close to that. I mean, we would be doing extremely well, I think, if we got half. And it may even be, what qualifies may even be less. So I think that's another,
and so the balance of that property then is still open to do rate control ponding and that kind of thing, if we need it. Further treatment ponds.
if it's an area that would be suitable. But chances are, it would probably diminish the opportunity because you're getting most of the treatment through the wetland portion already.
Okay,
And then you have to do wetland restoration.
Right. Because you'd be destroying the wetland. It's a catch-22.
well, the original Sunrise River engineering project was proposed to be treatment in Bixby and then ponding, further treatment reductions in the tax forfeit property in both Washington, and then Archie's farm was, of course, up for consideration, and the tax forfeit property. So that was going to be a whole big nature kind of pond to encourage wildlife and also further rate control and sedimentation release.
My recollection of that is that we were talking about wetland restoration for those areas the whole time. I mean, it could be done in many different ways.
Yeah,
Water.
a dynamic system that would have recreational, some educational, not real recreational, but some trails and so forth, so that we could teach people about the value of wetlands. Yeah, okay. All right. So it's $10,000 to move forward with this. Steve, were you ready to make the motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we, the board approve spending the scope of work to scope out the wetland area that we're considering, not to exceed $10,000, as stated in this memo.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Old business, Site B, Hool Property, Natural Resource Management Plan.
Madam President, we handed this report out, or the management plan, with the options at the July 12th board meeting. And so it incorporated a few different management options. And I don't know if, Dr. Funky, if you want to go through some of them, or if there's any particular questions, how you want to go through that piece.
I think you should do an overview.
So, Madam President, managers, basically, one of the key findings in this natural resource management plan, and actually the figure, find it again. I think it's in the main body of the report. So in terms of managing this site for water quality and the hydrologic benefits, one of the things we noted was the presence of buckthorn, which dense buckthorn essentially shades out the understory, and then you get erosion, and so you lose that benefit. So in part of the restoration of the site, okay, it's figure 8 on page 28. This is a nice description of, the different plant communities on the site and kind of the existing conditions that we noted. So the little tree figures, thank you, Jessica, it's up on the screen as well. Shows, that was location of buckthorn. There's also reed canary grass in portions of this. And then it shows where there's some green ash tamarack swamp in the green on the western edge, some cypress sedge wetland in the blue, and then some upland. So one of the recommendations in terms of the ownership of the site is to just keep monitoring into the future, do some buckthorn removal and improvements of the vegetation in the site. And then, so the red boxes with the X's outline kind of areas that are where buckthorn was within each of the 3 different vegetation types, and in areas where buckthorn wasn't found, just to keep an eye on that in the future. And that would be something that the district would want to pursue, is just keep managing for that buckthorn. Just the removal of that really enhances the water quality and hydrologic benefits of this site. Otherwise, the rest of the report just goes through just, some of the existing things that were found. It's a nice summary of what we have. And then there's a table in terms of the implementation plan and costs on page 15 that goes through those specific, basically invasive species management recommendations for the site. So buckthorn management's at the top. It goes through the different activities you would need to do and approximate costs per acre. It's about a 2 to 3 year process. You've got to keep going back. It tends to come back.
What's the total of all of that? I know it was in a different report that you keep referring to in here, but do you know off the top of your head?
The total cost of the management activities?
Of doing this restoration, basically, getting rid of the invasives and restoring it back.
It's not listed here, and I don't recall, but
Okay.
that's something we could calculate and come
Yeah,
back with as a
that was something.
clarification.
If you're done, I have a couple of questions specific. On page 11, when you're talking about this buckthorn, the timing, if that was to take place because of when it has to happen, looks like it would be Q2 for those first probably 6 bullets. But then there are late fall opportunities listed in the bottom 3 or 4 bullets. So did you propose that we start this in 2018, Q3 and 4?
Well, I think the removal would occur first.
Uh-huh.
So, and there'd be time to, we would need time to kind of gear up
Put
to
it together?
that. But I can confirm that. That was my understanding.
Yeah. And then under 12, at the top of the page, all of these concepts that you have with partnering with the Conservation Corps, volunteers, I really like that. And I think, working with our CAT committee to get those volunteers together, this could be a real community education, outreach kind of bonanza. So I really like that. Under reed canary grass, can this be coordinated with volunteers and perhaps city staff who has the equipment to do all of this, so that we don't have to rent people with the kind of equipment that you're talking about? That's another joint activity that we, I think, can promote to get this back to full functioning. And then on 13, you talk about all these different trees that could be planted. We could probably get those from the University of Minnesota for very little, if zero cost. But just a mixture of what you've got listed there would be quite visually pleasing on that corner of the freeway in our area. So I thought that was really good. 14, you're recommending additional land acquisition. Hydrology restoration, of course, which is important. That's part of the cleanup. But the additional land acquisition, have you identified properties?
I believe these are those parcels we looked at that were kind of south and west, when we were talking about doing a more complete, or to the north, a complete restoration for hydrology on that site. So, you know, this is one piece of that puzzle, but to do that complete restoration prior to crossing 35.
Well,
So
I-
that's based on those past reports that we've presented. And
Well, I'd like to have that pulled together into one kind of summary, because based on this summary on page 14 here, I mean, this has major positive benefits to the Sunrise River and the Comfort Lake drainage area. I mean, this is treating, you know, helping to treat and reduce the stormwater impacts from that big, heavy commercial, 100% pervious area, which is growing, as we just learned. So I thought that was great. So this is, so far, this presentation has, you know, those multiple benefits that I've talked about. The granting resources on page 17, now some of those I haven't seen presented to us before. So these are new grant opportunities that we could be exploring and not having to rely on the ones that are becoming quite difficult. So if these are available for this project, then maybe they're available for other projects that we have going on in our district.
So, Madam President, I think one of the, several of these in part are applicable now. And this is the interesting aspect of this project with the Buckthorn that I think has application both to outreach. It seems like volunteers, people get really excited about buckthorn removal.
That's because
It's
there's
a
been
way
so much
to-
education on it.
Right, people are aware of it. And so
Yeah.
that's more the upland management. So
And the U of M has done a great job on that, too.
they have, yep. So it's nice, this project would partnership more with that upland management, which we do more of the wetland and the
Yeah.
in lake. And so connecting that for people, I think. And then there's more funding sources available
Okay.
with that buckthorn invasive species removal.
Yeah. And then we talked about this already, but on summary of recommendations, if you could do a cost per year, total cost per year, and how, you know, just a top level on how you
Yep.
see this project. So there's a number of different steps in here. That would be very helpful to flush out. And then on the map on page 21, if you could show the flow of the streams and the ditches and so forth, so that we get an idea of that water hydrology. And the impact of the Highway 8 project, which is at the very northern part of this intersection with Highway 8 here. I don't know what that big blue thing is. What is that supposed to represent? Is that a wetland, perhaps?
That's denoting Bixby Park, the
Oh, Bixby,
DNR.
okay,
It's
of
just
course.
a DNR.
Okay,
wetland.
so it's Bixby, because it's got water in it most of the time now. But this unnamed stream and all of that, any idea of where impacts from the Highway 8, or the Highway 35 and 8 ramp might be? That's right in that area. So if you could flesh this map out, that would serve a lot of purposes. On page 22, the squiggly kind of orangish pink, what is that supposed to be? Is that a stream, or is that the hydrology boundary?
That's showing the ecological, so the kind
Oh,
of upland
subsection bound-
vegetation.
okay.
Differentiation. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, I think.
That'd sure be a nice area for a park for people
Yeah.
to walk through too.
And then on page 26, that map, there's a blue connecting line between Jamie Lee Slough and unnamed over to the right. I just can't get my bearings on where that is, so I don't see any streets designated, but it looks like this is the intersection for 35 around Forest Lake, right in the middle where the whole property is. So this unnamed must be Bixby Park,
Correct.
obviously. So this connecting stream here to this Jamie Lee Slough, that's got to be in Oka County, I would think. Is it that directly connected to Bixby?
We can double check. I know that there is the ditch that crosses 35. Some of these line work are from state layers that tend to be a little outdated. So,
Well,
but we
it
can look at
concerned
that.
me because to me, you know, if this is true, this is kind of like another JD6, where you've got this whole section that's not part of a hydrology boundary that looks like we're getting inputs from. So we better know what that is.
We can check on that line work.
Yeah. And that was it. I have a couple of typos, but I'll talk to you about that later, afterwards. That's pretty minor. So what did you want us to do with this? Just talk about it? What action do you want us to take on this? It does say action.
Well, from the standpoint that there were several management options,
Uh-huh.
the board, I think, has given staff some direction to bring back some additional information.
Yeah.
And I presume we would try to do that in fairly short order to inform the
Okay.
budget process.
Good. Okay, so obviously the recorder has captured all of those things that I've talked about that would be helpful to have. Okay.
So are the ash mostly dead in that area? Or why are we, it has all these species suitable for replacing the ash, and I was just wondering, why are we replacing the ash?
I think it's anticipating, it's one of the management strategies for emerald ash borer, to kind of get ahead of it.
Yeah, don't wait
So-
for it.
Right, so that was one of the monitoring recommendations too, is just, put a box out, see if there are emerald ash borer in the area, and then consider, with conjunction, DNR, if they would recommend taking them down or replacing.
They're kind of messy trees though, but on page 13, that list of other options that don't have that borer issue, that's a nice choice.
Correct.
I mean, that would be,
The property to the left of that Holes property, that's right across from Cub Shopping Center, right? So is that better land which could be commercialized? Can you tell by just looking at the diagram?
Madam President and Manager, so that property immediately to the west is is owned by this entity that's leasing to Home Depot.
That's the one we can't
Right.
get a hold of anybody.
We had a contact in Montana, then it was Texas. We actually had, we found an address eventually, according to the tax records on the county, for an office in Minneapolis. And so we asked, it was around the corner from Smith Partners, so we had Chuck walk down there and deliver a letter, but it was just like another, front, if you will. And then we got connected to somebody in Montana, and then we wrote them a letter, and then somehow got to somebody in Texas, and we've not heard anything back. So,
have you called corporate, Home Depot corporate?
yes, and I've hand-delivered a letter to the manager as well
Okay.
on site there. So we have really tried to make contact with them, and their real estate office as well, so that's why we.
Have we tried Putin? He probably knows who's got it.
We should,
So, but I mean, if you may recall from the report initially on the Hool property, that immediately, and I've walked around on the north side of that Home Depot property, it's all wetland right up to the edge of the blacktop. I mean, we know that it was filled, to construct it at whatever time. And it would be nice to see them do some more work on the cleaning, because obviously there's quite a bit of junk that makes its way in there.
well, since we have a recommendation in this report to look at the property nearby, this one, so that we can continue that process that we're starting here with treatments and restorations and so on, we should probably talk about pursuing that in a more, direct manner, maybe, instead of staff time. Maybe there's got to be people that we can contract with for a few $100s to track down these people.
Property owner finder.
Exactly. There's got to be a way to do it.
They gotta be able to find them.
Did you try with the county, the assessor's office, and it's not the assessor, what department?
Oh, the property records.
Yeah, treasurer, property records.
It was just the address listed for Minneapolis.
Okay.
Oh, but that didn't turn fruitful.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that offline. There's got to be a better way to try to find these people.
Dog the bounty hunter's still out there.
Okay. Okay, next item, B, manager replacement process. This was mainly Jackie had asked me about it again at the last workshop that we had recently here. And just to pick up from where we left off, I think we're just trying to finalize this. We wanted to have a protocol as part of our governance document so that we don't run into these multiple people in the same year with their terms expiring. Number one, Lewis had a really good suggestion to Chuck, which was just to re-stagger them by the appointment that occurs this year, then ends at the 3-year mark in September, where it should have been. And then we'll get back to sort of a staggered approach. And I'm talking about if the terms had been completed on time and reappointed on time. So we're not going to go from the end dates that we're on now, but the original.
Jackie McNamara is not done, right?
She is. She's not going to, yeah, she's not going to continue. She can't. She's got too many personal obligations and a family. And so she said the city recommended her to the county last time. And I don't, Scandia didn't do yours, right? Did you go to the Scandia?
Last time I did not, I'm trying to think if I went, I may have went before them the first time, but generally the way it works, at least with Washington County, is if you're interested in being reappointed, they just reappoint you. So you don't really need
You don't have to fill out an application?
recommendation
Okay.
from the city or anything.
Yeah,
And basically, if I were to renew, I would just let them know that I would be interested in being reappointed. And normally,
yeah,
if you're not doing anything wrong, they just reappoint you. But
right.
as far as my vacancy, I've talked to Brenda, I talked to Alyssa Soderland at the county, and I gave Jen Oaknick a recommendation, and then also I talked to people at the city of Scandia, not the mayor or the council members or anything yet, but I talked to Judy Nagus and explained that Jen would be putting in an application, and Jen, she emailed me and said that she had gotten a hold of Brenda Eklund at the city and filled out an application. So I don't know what the process is from there, but I know when I first got on, I had an interview with the county commissioners. And so if there's, I don't know how many other applicants there would be, but
Well, they have a process where they have to advertise, the county does, you know. They're not required to do the recommendations to the county. And according to statute, they have to give 3 recommendations for each open seat. And that doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
part of our discussion before, Mike, you were going to contact the cities to find out if that's how they wanted to continue to do it. And if they don't, then it just goes to the county anyway by statute. So if we don't have to go through that city process, I think that would be a lot easier on everyone. And then I think the thing that worked well in the past is that our administrator would just call the county and remind them that there's an open seat coming up. So that would have been at the end of September typically. So in July, a courtesy call goes out and says, we've got, a board seat that's going to be up. But then beyond that, it's really up to each manager to manage that process. So making sure that you give that 60-day notice to the county. And if you're not going to be wanting to be reappointed, then that gives them time to bring somebody new in.
yeah, and I gave them more than 60 days.
Yeah, I know, that's good. That's really good. So if you could, Mike, make that phone call to the city of Scandia and Forest Lake, just to find out if that's how they want to do it, and then reminding them that statute requires 3 names per open seat, not just 1, but 3. And then that goes to the county board, and then the county board decides. Because the whole point is not to be tied to political things in the local community. The county board's distant, but still
So
connected.
is there any difference between, no, I think you brought this up at the last meeting, but being that we're the only watershed district, I thought the way it read, from what I read on that thing that Washington County sent out, it said that cities wholly within the metro area
Yeah.
need to have every city,
Yeah,
so technically, are we excluded from that if we're not, because the law might be a little different for
no,
us even though-
because we got a special favor legislation passed
Oh,
that allowed Chisago County to become part,
okay,
and this district to become part of the metro
all right.
watershed district, so we follow those rules.
But I don't think you're ever gonna,
You're not gonna get
you're
three.
not gonna get three people.
No.
It doesn't happen.
No.
There's not that many people
Well, and that's why I
interested.
think, if Mike calls out to the cities and asks them if, you know, do you really want to do this? And if they do, that's fine, they can legally, but if they don't, then it just reverts to the county, and the county then advertises. So you get a much broader scope, you know, a reach, if you will, for those possible candidates.
No, my first term was, started, I think, my first meeting was February of 2007, so, but mine was actually, somebody had stepped down who was before me. I think.
Yeah, I know who, well, I can't remember his name, but I know who you're talking.
He was the hydrologist from the
DNR, or
No,
not,
MnDOT.
Minnesota, MnDOT.
MnDOT.
Okay.
I don't remember his name either, had black hair.
Yeah.
You might remember.
I can't remember his
Cecilia
name.
wasn't here either.
Okay. It wasn't Kurt Sparks.
No. He lived near Bone Lake. He lived in Scandia.
Yep.
And he was gone all the time with MnDOT projects, so he was there maybe once every 3 months.
He ended up moving out of the
Yes, he
district.
did,
Yeah.
yeah. Got a different job and moved.
Yep.
Okay, so Mike's going to follow up with the cities and find out how they want to handle that first step. If they don't, then he will contact the counties with a courtesy call when a manager's term is up. And then from that point forward, it's up to individual board managers to talk to their commissioner. Ours is by district, or ward district, I think. I think probably all of them are. So you have to contact your appointing or your representative commissioner and let him know.
So do you think, is it possible that, assuming no one else applies for my position, is it possible that Jen Oaknick could be appointed by the time?
Yes, I think,
That's
if
kind of the way
council,
it made it sound.
right, if council was here, there's been a lot of variation of interpretation. The statute is less than clear on the process. This element of wholly within the metropolitan area. If the establishment petition was from a majority of the cities, or if it was citizen petitioned, all these variables, and I can share my limited experience, but I do not see any, hardly two municipalities or counties operating anything, exactly the same. I mean, we can offer the information, the statute, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's still up to the counties to interpret the law and make the appointment process. I think the one thing that we could encourage is to try to set the expiration date of the appointment, as Lewis Smith had offered, and Jackie mentioned at the beginning, was to stagger the appointments in such a manner that they rotate over a period of time, and that would be maybe a good one, because currently for Washington County, we have 2 of the 3 that expire in a single year. It would be nice if they were staggered 1 each year, so there would not be such turnover for Washington County. And then, similar for Chisago County.
Yep, so again, I think these are all, we're just talking about professional courtesies here, just to make sure that the process goes smoothly and we don't end up with these dead spaces where nothing's something should be happening, but nothing's happening because nobody's taking control of it. But if we can write up that policy for our governance manual and then we can vote on that at a future meeting to make it official.
For guidance, okay.
Yeah.
So do you know if anybody has Jackie let the county know then that she's not?
I told her at our workshop when she asked me about it, I told her to contact the city right away
Okay.
and let them know because that's how she went through the process.
Do you know if anybody's interested in her position, Steve, or do you?
I don't know, the city normally picks the people.
Oh, the city? Oh.
Yeah, the city selected me because they knew me from being active with the Lake Association and so forth, so. So I don't know, I don't, they probably selected Jackie because of her past political experience, running for mayor and being on the council for a number of years, and so they trusted her and so forth, so. But how they do that, I don't know. I just know I write a letter to the city telling them that I'm gonna reapply and would appreciate their support, because I know what they recommend usually gets appointed if you pass the commissioner's interview.
Yep. And that's fine. Whatever the protocol is that the cities want to maintain, that's fine, because there is an option there. I mean, it's
Right.
not a mandatory. But what is mandatory is that they present 3 names for every open seat. That is pretty direct in the statute. But if they want to be involved in it, that's great. If they don't, if Scandia doesn't want to, then that can go right to
I
the
think
county.
they'll vote on,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I
Yeah,
think,
good.
you know,
That's good.
because they wanted whoever was applying to have it in by like July 27th or something.
Perfect.
So I'm assuming that they're gonna vote on something at a meeting or.
Have you called Ben yet to tell him that you're going to be staying
I
on?
sent an email to the
Perfect.
administrator
Perfect.
of Chisago County.
Yeah.
And when I talked to
Ben's
Alyssa
well,
Soderlund
okay.
at the county, she said it's not necessary that the city approves you.
Right.
But she says it's helpful,
Exactly.
so.
That's exactly right. All right, well, I think we've got enough info to Mike to take a stab at a governance policy. And then for the immediate need, I think, Mike, if you could follow up with Jackie, just to McNamara, to make sure that she's got this the information to contact who she needs to contact. We can get that ball rolling, and you've already taken care of yours, Wayne, thank you. And you're trying.
I'm trying.
So that's good. Okay, next is the monitoring update, old business.
Right, Madam President, managers? So I'm bringing some preliminary midsummer water quality results from all of our monitoring efforts, and also it's nice to bring it forward to remind everybody where we're collecting. And in part, there's 2 efforts. There are the diagnostic efforts, so Little Comfort, Hayward, Castlewood, JD6, and then there's also our project effectiveness, so then Bixby, Hilo, Third Lake Pond. So in no apparent order, I believe, of these, Little Comfort, again, we're monitoring at that Heath Avenue pipe outlet. On each of these slides, I have 6 total, just going through an aerial image of where the monitoring stations are and just some of the average phosphorus concentrations we've seen from this year. Just note in this bottom left, I'm showing you, so far we've gone out for 7 events. One was snow melt, and then we had 6 rain events, of various sizes. I would just comment that really up until our July rain event, and that was that really large 3 to 4 inch rain event, it was actually rather dry early May after that snow melt. So when I've been looking at some of the stream level data at these sites, there weren't a lot of responses to these rain events, like big peaks, not until we got to the end of June. So some of these concentrations still might be kind of these lower flow characterizations.
The 2 days on those rain events that you've got 2 days, does that mean you monitored for 2 days, or the rain event took 2 days?
It means the rain event fell over
Okay.
several days.
That July one, though, was pretty much in just a few hours.
It was, I think, yeah, technically,
It kind of spit a
we
little
put it
bit
over
after
into
that,
the
but
next day, but
I
yeah.
had 3 inches in 2-hour period.
Quick,
Right.
fast.
It was drizzling beyond that, but
Right,
yeah.
yep.
Okay.
And so all these rain events are a little different. And when we do our flow, our detailed analysis at the end to calculate load, we account for those factors. And just to help, because it ends up being a lot of numbers on these slides, I know, I just color coded a little bit. So in bold, when they're really low, which to me, less than 0.15 milligrams per liter is a good water quality. Moderate, 0.15 to 0.4. I mean, we're dealing with sites that might need restoration. So anything that's over 0.4, I'll just highlight in red just to help you see. So at Heath Avenue, it's 0.24 milligrams per liter, kind of in that moderate range, but I think what we're really interested in seeing at the end of the year is the total volume to Little Comfort Lake.
So how do we determine total volume then? That has to be worked on then?
Correct. We are collecting stage
Okay.
at the inlet of that pipe, and then we go out and measure
But you
flow
can't make
to-
any kind of an estimate at this point in time?
It's very hard because in part, we don't have our complete rating curve yet for
Okay.
these sites, so. So some of these, just preliminarily, in the Castlewood area, we discussed this just briefly at the board workshop on Tuesday. But you can see we have these 3 monitoring stations. Last year, we monitored at Highway 97 and at the outlet of this whole drainage area, which starts in the south and goes through the golf course. And that was where our first round of monitoring, we saw some results from last year showing that at Highway 97, we had our higher concentration and actually improves through the golf course. So then that shifted our focus on potential projects south of 97. So you can see we had one station that's off of a gentleman's property that's just kind of west of the agricultural field. So the average concentration is 0.46. And Mike Kinney mentioned last meeting that we're going out now, try to look at some of these laterals that come off of that field, and then also maybe do just a one-time transect down the stream to really confirm our suspicion that the load's coming from that field to identify
Isn't that property
practice.
for sale?
No.
Is it south of there? There's a sign. I had time to actually go to Stella's and get a sandwich before the meeting today. So I passed it, and there's a big sign right in here.
Madam President, managers, I've been
You know-
lying at that. It's just to the west. They would like to sell that property. The owner received that as part of, or as the executor for a trust. Her grandfather had bought it just as speculation decades ago. And it's just been farmed. But the soil is really in poor condition. And when I was out there just hours before that heavy rain, and so though that field is for sure contributing a fairly large load. But she, in communicating with her this last time, just within the last couple of weeks to get permission to go out there, she conveyed to me that they want to sell it, but there's not enough capacity in the metropolitan sewer line for that property to be developed.
Gotcha.
So they can't develop it even if they want to, which they do want to. So it'll be on hold for a while, which then would allow the districts some additional opportunity to evaluate exactly what some options might be, and then maybe working with the city. If it came in, what could we want to potentially protect or buffer or anything?
It looks like that phosphorus is dissipating, though, in the golf course. That's kind of unusual.
Right, we were surprised to see that. But they've done some improvements on the kind of western
flow?
ponding and
Yeah.
the whole drainage system.
Good.
So,
Because that's not a bad outflow from the golf course, that close to the,
no, even in the original 2016 diagnostic, it was, it came up as one of our higher areas simply because of drainage area, but in terms of the concentration,
Yeah.
was a little lower than others.
okay?
Right, so this is an area where we're actively pursuing, and Mike Kinney and EOR staff were looking at grant opportunities.
But Madam President and managers will note that the treatment occurring in those ponds through the golf course will not last forever. It's like anything, over time, if this field remains open and cultivated in its current state, that'll eventually fill up and be more and more.
Well, the ponds have to be cleaned out periodically, though, right? I mean, those are,
Well, but they're
Older
not
ponds?
necessarily stormwater ponds, but
are they treatment ponds for the golf course, being that close to the lake?
No, this was,
They
it was,
features.
it was just features,
Golf
it was-
course features,
Right,
okay.
it was
Water
owned,
hazards.
owned by the township, and then,
I put a lot of golf balls in them before.
Probably irrigation too, right? I mean,
Right, the pond by what, is the little, looks like the green guy to denote the golf course,
Yeah.
is where they would pull for irrigation.
Okay.
irrigate from the,
And then at other places, it's really just to make it,
just to make it more difficult, but.
well, and also, it's probably originally part drainage too. It's very, very wet throughout this whole golf course.
Okay.
It's hard to know sometimes where the pond ends and.
I can tell you where the middle of the pond is.
Maybe the ag field would be the good golf course, and that should be returned to wetland.
Flip them.
They wouldn't put that much stress on the metropolitan system that way.
We're very,
There you go.
we've solved our problems.
Yep.
In the JD6 area, again, this is where originally we had some monitoring in 2016 at that R7 near the north end and kind of drainage off to the west, R7D, and then the R7U at 202nd. Last year, we took a couple grabs at Jeffrey Avenue and JD6 ditch to try to see what was happening south of 202nd. So this year, we've just been a little more strategic. We have level loggers out. So you can see, it's actually a Jeffrey Avenue site. It's the eastern portion in the southern portion of this drainage area, where this is a really high concentration, 0.63, but it is high flow. So sometimes we see the high concentrations in these lower flow. So that's been an area we're looking into of, what sort of wetland influences are impacting those high concentrations.
Is that farmland or?
No, it's a lot of wetland, and that's part of this diagnostic work. We've been out actually the last couple of weeks, a couple of days here and there, doing some survey work, trying to really walk these ditches, and we're deploying piezometers to look at the wetland water level and to get some pore water from the wetland.
Who owns that wetland then?
Pardon?
Who owns the wetland?
Oh, I can't recall. They're larger parcels, but
Okay.
in
But
the
some private party owns it, huh?
But, and in the south, there's Mike, do you remember it's a natural area?
Hardwood,
Maybe he's looking at the park.
something hardwood or.
yeah, Harbor
Yeah,
Creek.
I'm trying to recall. We
DNR
talked about that
owns,
during the
but-
boundary update.
But I don't think that's what we're talking about here. That is the area, that is the theoretical start of the Sunrise River in that area.
One branch of it,
I presume the southern.
exactly, because there's one that found over by Bixby that comes in that way, when they did all that Comfort Lake, early Sunrise River stuff, I mean. And then it looks like there's one over by Moody that starts the Sunrise River that goes into Little Comfort. But for sure, our district is obviously the starting point of the Sunrise.
So some moderate concentrations in the middle is similar to what we saw in 2016 from this site, and then a little higher coming up from the northwest. But we're actively in this last part of July within August, finishing up the survey work and then collecting those samples from the wetlands. So that's kind of where we're at with this.
Is it looking
project.
like this is still close to that high level of input to Forest Lake that you had in your preliminary report?
Yes, these I'm calling them moderate, but they're still high. They need to be reduced. These concentrations are too high to protect the water quality of
Well, I think
a
you
lake
had
like
it
Forest Lake.
representative as pounds per year input, and it was in the 600 level, pounds per.
Correct,
per
for
year?
the total.
Okay,
And
so
so,
these results are leading you to believe that that's accurate?
so these are concentration based, so there was a flow weighted mean concentration associated with that load. And so we can't calculate the load till the end of the year.
Okay,
But these concentrations seems within the range we saw
okay.
in previous years. Yeah.
It wasn't an anomaly. This is a pretty consistent thing then. Okay,
Within the,
all right.
the range that you would see anyway. Yeah, correct. So then that gets us into our projects. I would just note, so in Hayward Avenue, all the work was primarily wetland piezometer work, trying to delineate that area. So that's why there's no data from surface water tributaries. That wasn't part of our original scope. So the Moody Wetland Rehabilitation, one of the things I just wanted to.
I'm sorry, could
pardon?
you repeat that last part? It wasn't part of your scope. What wasn't part of your scope?
So I'm not presenting any street tributary data from the Hayward Avenue,
Okay,
but that system is more, we were trying to figure out what's going on with those wetland
Okay.
complexes. so.
okay.
In the Moody Wetland Rehabilitation project area, if you recall, we had the Elm Treatment on Wetland A and B, June 12th, I believe, now. So what I'm showing you is average concentrations of samples we collected prior to that date and then following the treatment date. So that Wetland A, the largest wetland rehabilitation pond, you can see a very significant drop in that phosphorus concentration, as we would expect from an Elm treatment. In Wetland B, this is it's very small. This is where the cattle have the direct access. There's still accumulated sediment. We couldn't excavate enough out of that one. The Elm treatment in this one, what was interesting to note is you still see a pretty significant reduction. It's not as low as the concentration coming out of Wetland A, but there's 2 dates where this concentration was averaged, and actually the most recent event in July was below 0.1 milligram coming out of Wetland B as well. So this one may have needed a little more time or some more of that water to flush through to get that treatment effect, but it's something we'll continue to watch. All year, the concentrations out of that Wetland C have remained higher, but there's also really low flow, which is what we observed in our initial diagnostic summary. So the total load may still be within our project goals, but clearly in Wetland A and B, we're seeing the results that we were hoping to, at least preliminary.
Is that Google Maps underneath?
It is Google Earth.
Oh,
Yep,
Google Earth, okay,
correct.
all right.
So how come?
I tend to use this because
how
it's
come
the most
Wetland
recent.
C is so high?
Well, Wetland C tends to have a lot of evapotranspiration from the plants. We lose a lot of volume. At what we noted from Wetland B to Wetland C and that the first year monitoring was, you almost reduce about half the volume coming out. And so there's this concentration effect through that
Concentration
wetland.
goes up. Which you see, 0.57 to 1.1 and 0.26 to 0.7.
And this is a low, I mean, I would consider this a low flow year all in all because of that dry maize so far. Last year, we were seeing concentrations out of Wetland C that were lower, but we had a lot more flow. So, and again, it's hard to make an assessment until we have the full year, the water year, to see how this compares to last year. Then we get to Bixby Park, like what we were talking about with this wetland banking, this project consistently is showing, as we're monitoring it, about a 40% reduction from the compost road inlet to that outlet weir, which is, so there's a Highway 8 station of 0.12 milligrams per liter at the top, and then the outlet weir is at 0.09. And that's a great concentration coming out of this wetland project. The inlet concentration at Compost Road was 0.16. That's where most of the flow comes through, and there's a little bit from the I-35 culvert. And again, that's something we've been keeping our eye on, and the concentrations aren't creeping up from any of the construction activity, so that's good to see. So again, just consistent results of good treatment through Bixby Park. And then Hilo Lane, iron enhanced sand filter.
Can we go back there for just a second? I'm
you
sorry.
got
The .09 is at the outlet weir,
Correct.
and then the .12 is on the other side of Highway 8? Just immediately on the other side?
Correct. I'm actually not sure if he monitors on the southern or northern. It looks like the southern
Yeah,
with
it's
where
like
he's
it's
pinned.
this
He's
side.
usually pretty accurate, Mike Majeski.
So it picks up a little bit between the outlet weir and Highway 8.
Correct. And there's
Outlet.
additional water that joins from, that you see
From
that
that
east.
pond, that green pond that's right
Correct.
there.
Yeah, behind the houses.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's probably lawn runoff.
And whatever legacy.
Well,
Phosphorus
there's a
may be in that
targeted
wetland.
project for outreach and education.
Fill the pond.
And it's, again, in this stepwise fashion the district goes through. It's sometimes not apparent what other impacts there are till you work on fixing one problem and then can isolate the next problem, so.
But this is so perfect because you have nothing else in between. So the source of that is pretty damn clear. Okay.
Right, so then, these are the last two projects, just put them on one slide, since they're smaller. So the high-low lane, iron enhanced sand filter, again, with the iron enhanced sand, I would expect to see concentrations this low. And that just indicates to me that it's, one of the things we're looking at is to make sure we get the drawdown through the sand so it dries out and it really has that function. And actually, a lot of it, there was one sample that was a little higher, the rest are actually closer to 0.2, 0.3. Or 0.2, 0.03, so.
Wow.
So that's great. And then Third Lake Pond, very similar results as last year, just, and again, like Bixby Park, just consistently.
Where was
low.
high-low when we started, before we started the project?
I'm not sure we actually had a sample from that site, but one would assume,
Yeah.
there wasn't a defined drainage. I'm not sure if we ever collected anything, but from what we've seen, from this whole area, 0.2 would be my guess.
Right, because I mean, the estimate was like 12 pounds reduction. It wasn't large, it was.
It's very exciting. It's good.
Yeah,
But-
so,
And this will all be on the website, all these maps? Okay. Anything else?
Well, Madam President, managers, just in terms of the high-low project, you may recall a couple weeks ago, we had a meeting at the district office when we had that large rain, and the one property owner there sent me an email at 6:59 that, and with some photos, it's really high, I'm not sure it's working, there's so much water, we got about 5 inches, 5.5 inches. And at literally an hour and 1 minute later, text, or another message, the water went down, it's drained. So it's working.
It's working.
That was when, like last year?
No, just 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago?
When we had that
Oh,
5.
that
they-
call, that's, okay,
So,
all right.
5 inches of rain.
Nothing was working that day.
Things were backing up pretty fast everywhere.
That's funny. Okay, so we're done with old business. Next is report of staff administrator.
Did you do the project program update, or
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't, did I? I'm hustling along here.
is there one? I don't.
Is there an update on projects and,
Well, just from the standpoint that we have set another coordination meeting for staff, UR, and the district staff to kind of go through all of our pieces. We have the contracts for the fish barrier over at the contractor, gets signed, and then they'll put that in whenever for Shields, for the Shields Lake fish barrier. We're continuing to proceed with all elements of the Shields Lake project. So staff is put together in collaboration with the UR, in particular, our very detailed timeline of all of our projects using our smart sheet and basically a Gantt chart for that with dates and who's responsible and everything. Maybe sometime we'll show that to the board to show kind of what we have involved with there. So I've been sitting down with on the next phase of the Moody Wetland project with Mr. Peterson, Kurt Peterson there, and we're trying to come up with final design on that last piece of what we would do. That work likely will not occur until winter. We're talking about raising the elevation maybe 6 inches in that pond to provide more treatment, is what Dr. Funky just described in terms of evapotranspiration is really beneficial. But that, we don't see anything there. We've got all the easement documents ready to go. Just have to come in agreement with the final design of that with the landowner. And then, but we'll at least on track to do the alum treatment as well. Next board meeting, we'll have 2 public hearings for commencing our work on 2 of our projects. That'll be one of them. So,
I'll just add for.
nothing else going on?
Well,
Yeah.
we'll get to the permitting side here shortly.
Just add, since we're talking about the Moody Elm, another component that we'll be doing in August is try to have a little more aggressive outreach on,
Thank
you know,
you.
what an elm treatment is, some on-site meetings to really talk through the process, because there'll be a lot of equipment and tanks, things people aren't used to seeing
Right.
Right.
there. So Jessica and Emily are working on a flyer and some information, so.
How wide of an area do you send that to? Just the immediate properties, or do you have a system that you use?
Well, based on experience from actually the Moody Wetland ponds, it might be a larger area since a lot of people will drive by
By it,
and have
yes.
questions. So we might look at who kind of lives north of there, who lives on 250th.
And we got larger signs to put out there that say alum treatment, so even if they don't get a flyer, if they drive by, they'll go alum treatment, and maybe they'll Google it to get a better idea of what it is, and it has our logo on it as well.
Good. All right, it's always good. Anything else on that? Okay. Next is report of staff, administrator. Mike, you're first.
Well, I think, again, maybe the biggest thing to note is just the really heavy activity related to our permitting. You know, certainly we've been trying to do a lot of, just spend time on developing our next round of Clean Water Fund grants as well. But the permitting side has really spiked over the last, you know, couple of months, I guess, really.
I have some specific questions as I went through this. You provide detailed reports, and I need to get clarity on some of this stuff. On the first one, on 001, second bullet point, what is the, what is this individual or grant that you're proposing for the board? 10-year plan update and anticipated board turnover. You met with an individual about funding that we could get through the grant program, assistance grant program.
Correct. So I've brought this up a couple times. There's the assistance program, and the board could use it at any kind of level in terms of
It's specific to the board, though, board governance processes?
board development, board visioning, board plan development, prioritization. Really, it can be tailored to whatever the board desires.
Okay.
And so, but it'll be a grant up to $10,000 for that level of work, and thinking both in kind of a pre-development side of the of our 10-year plan effort, our involvement with the One Watershed, One Plan activities, and then some, you know, anticipated board turnover. I thought that we would be well suited for making an application and, you know, having some time with somebody that could work with the board to develop that. Again, I could work with the board in tailoring what that might look like, and then there are several private consultants that focus on these kind of activities, and Bowser has a number that they would recommend. And
Plan updates, you mean, or anything?
well, really depending on what the needs of the board or desire of the board, so.
Do you have information on the grant that you could provide to the managers?
Yes.
Okay. I think that would be helpful. Then we can pick this up at a later time. Under 1003, just I wanted to highlight that second bullet point that you were asked by Bowser
Nice.
and an SWCD manager to conduct a training session on budgeting at the Bowser Academy. I didn't know they had that. Is that for administrators, or what's the Bowser Academy?
The Bowser Academy is, historically, it's probably has a stronger bent towards SWCD staff, but it's been held, at least to my knowledge, for the last decade or so, up like at Breezy Point, 3 days towards the very end of October. And they often have technical sessions of various sorts, but Bowser specifically has had requests for doing budgeting work, and so I met on Monday or so with the Bowser staff and the SWCD manager that would be doing that. And what I've learned is that the SWCD process is very abbreviated. So while their process is very different, but also typically the managers come just kind of up the ranks. They've been a technician and they have no experience in the budgeting side at all. So trying to understand even from like, how does the audit process work? And then why do you budget? And, how do you engage your board or the county board? How do you do an ask for funds? And because I think what's happening is for a lot of them, they don't go in and make their case as to how what kind of service do they provide to the community at large, and then they get the contribution stays fixed, and then of course over time that means it's really less.
Right.
And from Bowser's side of it, at least their staff looking at watershed districts, they know that we have a very robust process, and they said that would be sort of the other side of the spectrum, and they just made that request of me to assist in
Well, I
that.
think that's great. I just wanted to call it out and find out what that academy was all about. If it is that SWCD portion, look at that slide deck that I think Jessica, you found it and downloaded it, that Doug Thomas put together. There's a budget section in there. And you're right, the income side is the difference. The operating side of the budget's going to be the same, but at income side, it's all coming from the county.
Well, they also operate with many, this.
Oh, grants.
For this, yeah, for Benton, a lot of small grants. He said like 40, some different small contributions or grants or things. And so it's a very different realm for them. But I will note also that I'm one of the administrators participating in the Bowser Academy training development for watershed districts. Bowser wants to have more watershed district staff in attendance, so that's
I like
part
that
of it.
idea of the separate academy for administrators, because there's not a lot that gets done up at the MOD meeting. There's too many technical sessions going on, so you don't really have that dedicated time. I think that's a great idea. Under 3002, there was a talk here, or there was a mention, about this, the work started before the permit was issued.
Yes,
And
which one?
well, I guess both of them, isn't it? But number 2, the second bullet point, the graph, is the one I'm talking about. So were any permits issued before the construction started, the city or the watershed?
Well, typically they will have a building permit in hand, and they have somehow managed to get through the process without getting the proper district
Building permit.
permit.
Oh, just the
They have
district?
they have the building permit.
Oh, they do, okay.
So, but then well, I know Aaron has been out communicating more with municipalities, kind of double checking, and, hey, have you had any new permits? Because they're not always, oh, yeah, hey, go talk to the watershed. So through her efforts, we've been catching more of them that way. I think historically, we've been just driving by and saying, and I think maybe that was one of them, I was just like, hey, I'm not familiar with this. But the others really have been, that we're catching now, it's just been through Aaron's diligence with their partners.
And have you reached out to the planning people and the administrators, to make sure that they know that they have to get permits? You're dealing with kind of a stable one, I think, in Wyoming, but the new one here in Forest Lake, they know to coordinate, right?
Oh, absolutely, right.
Okay. And scan
I'd
it?
say it's almost daily at this point, Aaron, that you're communicating with them, yeah,
Oh,
for
yes,
the
absolutely.
city.
And also, I'd like to point out too that Groff single-family home is now permitted.
Okay.
This is older information than
Okay.
today, so.
All right, well, that's good. Highway 8, I think I asked this before, but when we start getting into the culverts closer to Comfort Lake and the one that bridges Little, or goes underneath the area by Little Comfort and Big Comfort, did the MnDOT incorporate any quality features in those areas, or are they just replacing what was there before? They're not increasing size or doing anything different? Okay, all right. Oh, Liberty Ponds, down at the very bottom of that 9 permits fully executed, white dot, it's the very last one. I'm just wondering, this is 6 homes now in this summer in Liberty Ponds. How much is left in that development? Do you know?
There's still a lot of empty space, I don't know.
Well, it's wetland though, primarily. They're not gonna build in that area, I hope.
We do, through our effort this winter, when Greg and I met with them, we did get the original plat that from whenever it was, 2005 or so. So we could look at that and make that inquiry and
Yeah.
determine that.
Just make sure they're not encroaching on those wetlands, because that center part is supposed to be wetland. And they do have some ponds throughout that area, but the ditch that runs along the west side, where that canvas shop is next door, right along that little tree line, that is always the color of this bottle. So something's going on there. So if we could make sure that nothing's being encroached on those.
Could be duckweed.
I don't know, whatever it
Looks
is.
like
I was
duckweed.
just gonna say that
It's-
It
sometimes.
looks like duckweed when I drive by it.
It's
yeah.
bright green.
Yeah.
Well, Madam President, managers, I think one of the things that is just, the staff has talked about is given the age and the fact that a lot of it was constructed before district rules, are the stormwater ponds still anywhere close to being at the capacity that we would want them to? So we've talked about maybe having EOR go out or work with the city engineer to evaluate those out there.
Okay. And then at the top of page 3, the second white bullet point, 2 homes that did not obtain permits. Is this in Chisago City or in the township of Chisago?
Township.
Township, okay. And is that under control now with permits being,
Not the one, at least.
okay. I know some people over there, and so I'll make a couple of phone calls and try to get some action. That's not good when we have that happening. Just the note under education and outreach, some nice articles were in the paper. I don't know if you saw my.
Yeah, I did see your emails.
Yeah, it got stuck in junk, and so
I
I
don't know
did.
why that would be up.
Well,
I sent it to both addresses now.
No, I know that. I've been having some issues with my service provider, I think.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was a nice article.
Yep,
But,
it was.
Then under 3006, you're talking about the beaver baffle pond leveler on the south end of the lake, on that first black bullet point on Moody Lake. I just wanted to know when that will be constructed. There's been a lot of interest in that particular design for Comfort Lake and the Sunrise River. We constantly are having beaver dams there, and so this concept was researched. And if that's actually going to go in, if you could let us know, I would like to pass that on to the Comfort Lake Association.
Madam President,
Yes.
managers, thank you for bringing that up. I did in fact intend to put that into our budget.
Okay,
If it's going to go in, we would do the installing.
okay,
In most of these cases, of course, it's private property. And the one for Moody, we resolved the backup, at least at that time, by trapping all the beaver out and removing a sufficient amount of the dam to let the water flow. And then the owner engaged in a tear down and construction of a new home. So we kind of left it be because we were talking about, and he kind of at his request said, can we talk about this later? Sure. So it's time to, yes, get back there and engage them. There is another property on the west side. In fact, staff was out, Aiden and Peter were out taking a portion of it down to see if it gets reconstructed, to see if there's beaver activity out there. That has led to some complaints from a property owner farther upstream, which is, the complaint is really that the yard is wet, which was probably originally a wetland anyway, at least from what we can
We've had some high
surmise.
water, yeah.
Yeah, so, but at the same time, we, it is private property, and if they want to do something, and this particular property owner is not very keen on the idea of seeing the beavers trapped or other pieces. It's a nice rural property, and that's what they bought it for, and so, but I talked about this, and that might be a long-term solution that could mitigate it, and so.
Okay. Well, I think that that perpetual beaver dam on the Sunrise River might be a good alternative for testing this out, if that's what you want to do. Because I know the CLA would probably be interested, but I'm not sure what the DNR would say about it on the Sunrise. So we'd have to get permits from them, I'm sure.
Correct, we would.
Yep. And then under 3011, second and third bullet point, my point here, and I did find out because I called, but we had a resident on Comfort Lake think, she thought she saw or pulled out starry stonewort, but it actually was a native version of that, as I recall. But that might be appropriate to make a note in that AIS report by lake when we get these kinds of inquiries. Here too, but it might get lost, just so that we're more aware by those single pages by lake, what's happening. I did look that up, and the native starry stonewort looks very similar to the invasive. But we should just be aware, I think all of us, as in all of our lakes, of what's happening there. And then the purple loosestrife by the Aqua restaurant. We were going around the lake last weekend on the pontoon, and I'm pretty sure that we've got purple loosestrife on that point that's closest to the inlet of the Sunrise River. Not on the side of the inlet, but as you go around toward the homes, it's right there as you turn the point. On the last page here, on page 5, Shields Lake, the DNR did first fish surveys on Comfort, and I think Shields, and maybe one of the other lakes. I know for sure they did it on ours, but when will we get those results? Does it take a while, or should we expect something here by the end of the summer?
No, they'll process those over the winter, and then typically they just go up on their website, but we can ask the manager to send it to us when it's done.
Under the 5228, that first bullet point, you're talking about that document that you produced to show what this multi-year wetland buffer establishment was going to look like. And if we haven't received a copy of that, if we could just get that for the board so we can see what you produced. It sounds great. That's it for me. Anybody else have anything specific to that report? Okay, the next one is that one that I moved from 6 down to here earlier. So if you've got your complaints, compliments, requests, this is primarily, as Mike said, about inspections and permits. There's been a lot of them this year. And my only comment would be if you could put the Lake Management District that these permits are in, so that we have an idea. If it's a city, obviously include that city as well. That just helps us give a little reference point. And I was just a little concerned about the inspections identifying non-compliance issues. How many total permits did we have?
43,
Pardon me?
43, I think,
Okay,
active permits.
23?
43?
43, that's, okay, 43 active permits. And so if you could do this, I know you're doing it by inspections, and there's not multiple inspections by permit. So if you could just correlate that to those 43 permits, how many of those 61 non-compliance identifications, were they all one permit, or, well, it couldn't be one, but, you know, how many of those 43 permits would fall into that non-compliance? Was it 20%, 50%, you know, whatever it is, on a permit level, okay? That would be helpful. This is really good information, and it helps us keep a handle on the kind of land use activity and land use change that's going on in our area. I think that's it.
These the 11 permits that had non-compliance issues? There aren't
Okay.
any others?
Correct.
Okay,
And that was between 6:15 and 7:20,
Okay.
date-wise. So that's, really- I just kind of said.
That's in that window of time.
Yeah.
These 11 permits had issues.
so it's 11 out of the 43.
Correct.
Okay,
Um,
so a little over 20.
Managers, and president managers, so Liberty Pond has whatever, 5 or 6 there, and then, of course, the first one, Chestnut Creek, you know, has 200 some lots available, and then, so the number, so the scale is very different.
Right,
of
sure.
Both in terms of what,
Permits are not equal.
and not by any means, or the non-compliance component. I mean, some of the non-compliance are, they're just non-compliant enough to be non-compliant, and,
Right.
or some of them are days of activity involving staff and engagement with the city and the developer and the contractors and everything. So, and give Aaron a lot of credit, particularly just recently with the Chestnut Creek one. I think they red tagged about 10 homes in order to get them into compliance, the city of Forest Lake did. So we are getting some attention that way, but there's so much construction activity, and the erosion sediment control is pretty much the last thing on their minds when they're trying to get these things wrapped up and sold and or turned over to the homeowners. And so it takes a lot of effort to try to get their attention and communicate and be out there. I mean, honest to God, we feel like for Chestnut Creek, they could have a full-time erosion sediment control person out there doing maintenance work and things, and, but.
But it's so critical that we do this, because this is where the real damage can happen.
Right.
So it is just such critical work. And if it would be more helpful to separate out your developments from your single-family homes when you're reporting that non-compliance information, that would probably be helpful, because that makes sense. You know, you're going to have more visits to a construction site than you are to a single-family home. So that's probably a good separator. Anyway, thank you for doing this. It's very helpful.
Is this item number, or this number 4 on the list, the Bonin single-family home, have we been getting responses now, or are they continuing to be unresponsive?
Now we have the city involved, the city of Wyoming is involved at this point. So there's a meeting on Monday, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
So-
Is that right on Highway 8?
No, it's on like 250th, it's a shallow pond one.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not Bob, is it?
Well, the builders know what they're supposed to be doing, right?
Afterwards.
In 2018, you would think so.
Yeah, I mean.
I'll talk to you about this afterwards, because I know some Bonins pretty well, if it's the same family. I'll give them a call. Okay, thank you again. EOR?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Smith Partners is not here. Their report's really short. Okay, treasurer.
Yeah, the good news is we've got our levies from Washington and Chisago County, so the income for the month was over $661,000. And if you go to the next page, that puts our total funds at $1,570,000, and our actually fund balance at $1,145,000, which is about 44%.
Yep.
So we're back up there again.
Yeah, I saw that. That's great.
Then also, we have expenses this month of $147,844. And I ask the board to make a motion to pay the expenses for this month.
I'll move that we accept the treasurer's report and pay the bills.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Report of officers and managers. Wayne, you want to start?
Nothing.
John?
My house is still not sold after being sold.
I see the chain right there to that chair.
Not going anywhere, apparently.
Steve?
Nothing.
Anything from One Watershed, One Plan?
We haven't had a meeting since then, so the next meeting is the one that you're gonna go to if you go on that boat cruise.
Yeah.
And there's a 30-minute meeting ahead of time, so there won't be much there either.
That's in August, right?
The next big one will be when the workforce actually comes back with some initial preliminary recommendations, so we'll all see what's gonna come out of this a little
Okay.
bit.
Is that just for One Watershed, One Plan committee people, or is that open to boards in the lower St. Croix watershed district?
I don't know.
Okay, the
So-
only thing I thought might be interesting, if you could find out, is there's that 30-minute workshop beforehand, and so if that's an update, and if other board members want to go, that might be a good recreational way to get more information on
I
One
mean,
Watershed,
I'll
One
talk to
Plan.
Angie and find out and get back to the board.
Yeah, I appreciate that, thank you.
Always looking for recreational ways to do more work.
Well,
Thanks.
It's going to be a boat cruise on the St. Croix.
Oh, wow.
After the 30-minute workshop, so
That'll work.
that's not so bad. Okay, and then I wanted to just point out this stormwater tour and workshop on Tuesday, September 11th. The MRAP, our CAC, of course, helped put this together, so we want to make sure that everybody knows about it, and if you can make it, it should be a good one. And that's interesting. And the only other thing I just wanted to point out is that we got our letter from MnDOT on the Highway 8 project. So it's going to be a real nightmare
That's gonna
sometime
be
starting
fun.
in August. They don't give specific dates, but, so that did go out to the community. Did you get yours?
Yep, we got ours.
Yeah, okay.
Well, it looks like at one point in time, Pioneer Road, parts of Pioneer Road and Highway 8 may be closed at
At the-
exactly the same time.
Exactly.
They can't get there from here.
That's what it looks
We
like.
get to drive up to Chisago City to get back to Forest Lake.
Okay, next is summary of board direction. Did you have a chart you wanted to go over today?
Well, Madam President and managers, there's this larger sheet that you have, looks like this, and maybe also before I wrap up on this too, we might want to talk about and clarify some of the upcoming board meeting schedules and times. But I guess the only thing really to note is, since I have it in red here, is the cropland rental on Bone Lake. Hand that down if you want.
It was in that one packet.
For the Dowling property. Oh, yes, yeah.
Probably got it in this pile of stuff. Go ahead, go ahead.
But, so I did have it
There we go.
soil tested, and so the pH has come up from high threes, which is
Vinegar.
right, very low. I've never seen anything close to that low before ever, literally, and doing 20-some thousand acres of soil testing. So, but it's now up at least to 5, and we think that the time that it takes just for the lime to react, it should improve over this next year. I was not inclined to want to go spend another $5,000 on more lime when we don't have a permanent or longer-term contract with the owner. And then also, I did go out and walk a very large portion of the property and the matting, and that was just last week. And the grass that we rolled it last fall before we seeded it. And that is just like an erosion control blanket out there across that property. So where it looks brown, it's just the dead grass all matted down. But in the areas that are have any amount of slope or particular leading towards that ditch area that goes across to Bone Lake, there was no erosion observed at all. And I did see now some clover coming in that we had seeded, and then quite a bit of volunteer rye because they never harvested it last year. We just knocked it down in September when we rolled it. So some of it probably just got sort of reseeded, if you will. So overall, it may not look pretty, and we're not getting we don't have a crop to sell, but in terms of stabilizing the site and providing protection for Bone Lake, it's doing its job. So the recommendation from both the crop consultant and the conservation district was just to kind of do nothing at this point, let that lime react maybe another year, and we would evaluate again in September whether we want to go and do some reseeding or not, but.
Well, the rye will probably reseed again, right?
Yeah, it should. Yeah, I don't know. The one thing I might do is just have them go and mow it,
Spread it around a little bit.
right, towards sometime after the nesting season, which would be towards maybe the end of August or so.
The city of Wyoming threw seed down when our big tree fell down in 17 last year, in July, and that stuff came up so fast, and it was, I want to say it was oats. They just threw, handfuls of this stuff down, and in 2 days, we had what looked like grass coming up, and it was that fast. It was just immediate. So you might talk to them about what they use for that quick seeding, and put that, it can't be that expensive. If it's still an eyesore, but as long as it's coming back, there's some coverage there, it looks better.
Yeah, I think, well, it looks like it's pretty much all covered now, right? I mean,
Good.
by some sort of weeds or,
Well, right, looks like
Something,
there's
right?
quite a bit of mare's tail in there, but, which is not ideal, but.
Next year will look better.
Well, it should, and I mean, the clear problem from a cropping standpoint is that, it had just been, there was no soil structure, no tilt, and the pH was so low, they just couldn't raise a crop,
Yeah,
so.
well, maybe that's why one season with that quick seed stuff might be a good idea, but anyway, I just want to pass along so you can
Okay, thank you.
look into it, because it was so fast coming up.
well, it might have been the year they checked that, it could have been in corn too, and so that doesn't provide much cover for, if it's in rye or something and the rye comes up, that's gonna be some cover, but
Yep,
if the year that they checked it, it was a corn crop, that
okay.
would be bad.
So, did you need to point out anything on this, Mike, or just wanted to update us here?
No, that's the main piece.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, so the next item, yep,
Well, just in terms of the meeting schedules, so we just want
yes.
to make sure that we're all on this, have the same calendar. So for the next one will be August 9th, I believe. That's going to be a regular board meeting. So Jessica's been trying to herd cats here, so that's at 4 PM at the district office.
okay.
And then the following week, we have on Tuesday, a board meeting at 4:30.
Board workshop,
Correct, special
What
meeting.
date is that?
14th.
The 14th. So that's at 4:30 at the district office versus our normal 4 o'clock. I will note that at least presently on the agenda for the Thursday, the 9th, we just have the 2 public hearings for ordering the 2 projects. And then we would like to schedule the discussion, the budget discussion for the projects, the 5,000 level ones, for the remainder of that meeting.
Okay,
Ideally then to the following week on the 14th, that the board would have a consensus of what the budget would look like. And then the latter part, the second meeting, regular meeting in August is the 23rd. If at all possible, it would be ideal to approve the resolution and the budget at that meeting, earlier than normal. But if we go into September, there's the second Thursday is the 13th. That means then we have only Friday to get the levy certified to the counties. And so if we have, and we would not have normally then a day or so for them to verify it. So it's the one, if there's one thing that makes me nervous is making sure the levies get certified in time. Because if they're not there on the 15th, which is a Saturday, we're not getting our levy.
Well,
So-
we agreed at the last meeting on the end number. So
Right,
we're
so as long as
we're
we're-
going through priority setting right now.
We're moving.
So we moved on that last meeting. There was
Mm-hmm.
unanimous consensus on that.
Well, but we've already added additional costs in from the accounting and legal.
Well,
So I think we
I
need to
will-
be
I-
somewhat flexible, but, I mean, I think we're in the ballpark, but, so actually, August 9th, we're gonna work on the budget, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Project.
And the 14th will be, yeah, and the 14th, that'll be more work, but hopefully we can get it resolved by then.
Consensus by then.
Right, finalize, and then a regular meeting on August 23rd, we would do our public hearing. And, but of course, what's important is that we will, in fact, need a number to put in the paper. So if we don't have one,
As far as I'm concerned, we have that number already.
Okay.
We're just massaging priorities here. And I will get that, since we're gonna talk about it on the 9th now, I will get that done so that you, this weekend, and then send out that method that I was working on. And so you'll be prepared to challenge or support whatever's in that, because I thought that went really well at the last meeting.
Well, I guess we'll have some thoughts too then on other things too.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I'm saying. But the conclusion of all of what I was doing is that we have 300,000 to put into the reserve and use it. And that's staying within that number that we already approved. So I think we're gonna be in really good shape.
And is the number the same as last year?
Yeah. Yeah, the levy's the same, 1.2, although that was one of the questions that came up at the last meeting, is what is that mill rate? And what is the taxable value for Chisago and Washington, so that we can calculate out if we kept the mill rate the same, and then put it against that increased volume on the market level, we're going to have more money coming in.
My calculations were that it would be about 1.3 million,
Okay,
if the mill rate stayed the same.
okay,
And based on the
yeah.
property value from last year and the property value from this year,
Yeah.
so that's what it
And
was just
and the percentage of the levy, I should say that differently. So it's the percentage of the levy, if we keep that the
Right.
same against the higher mill rate, what does that generate?
Right.
But if we keep it at 1.2, then, and, you know, we still could do that reserve like we did for the loan. We don't have to take the loan, but our budget is going to be the 1.2 levy, and we're going to do it with 500,000 through that interest-free loan, if we need it. But what I'm saying is that by shifting some things into things that don't seem so immediate to me, we should be able to put 300,000 in reserve, and then we will have enough in there to do what comes up. But anyway, it'll make more sense when I get it all typed up from my notes. Now, are we ready? We've
Yes.
done? Okay, all right.
One final question, Madam
Yes.
President, managers. If we don't make the 23rd, then it's a 3-week gap to September 13th for the hearing and such. It would be helpful to know if there are any managers that are planning any activities that, you know,
Would take them away?
schedule-wise. So at the next meeting, if you could plan to bring your calendars and make sure then if we see how we're situated in terms of, because the other thing I'll have to just double-check is the requirement for how much time in advance that we need to publish it. So we may be brushing it up against that window already if we're waiting until the 9th.
Okay, so,
We already have our number.
Well, that's what I think, but
I think we'll make the 23rd of August.
I think we will.
Yeah, I think
we
so
will.
too.
Especially if we're adding an hour,
That's our
at least
goal.
to the discussion.
Yeah.
We have 2 public hearings, we probably have more than an hour to spend on the 9th on the budget. And the 14th is just, reserve time if we need it.
And a reminder that for the levy, we can reduce it after September 15th. We cannot raise it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, then I think we for sure have that number,
1.3?
1.2. The levy's the same at 1.2, unless we decide to keep the percentage the same. The discussion
I
was
think we're
last
better off, if we can always reduce it again, I think we should,
Well, but we have that loan program. That's the whole concept we had last year, is that we're going to keep that levy pretty even, and then we're going to have our 0% interest loan that we can tap into.
we should discuss it at the meeting, but I think if we can if we can just ride with whatever's happening in the value of the properties, we should take that extra 100,000 every time it comes up.
Okay, people's taxes will be higher then.
Yeah, it'll still show up on your.
Nobody
your
complained about the
tax.
big jump we had last year,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
this
Well,
will just sneak through.
I know, but, well, that's kind of what we were predicting.
That would pay off one of our loans. I
Didn't
mean,
think that, so I'm
annual debt.
I'm glad
Glad it-
you're coming around to that viewpoint. Good, 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 good. All right, are we done now with the regular business? Okay, we have an item, did you bring those copies, I hope? Okay.
So we have to adjourn the
We
regular
have
meeting.
to adjourn the regular meeting, and then.
We don't?
No,
Suspend
Suspend,
regular meeting to go into closed session.
yes,
Let me get the Robert's Rules of Order.
that's exactly it. So it won't take long, we'll probably just be a minute or two, and then we'll come back into regular session and adjourn the meeting at that time. So at this time, I'm going to move us into private closed session.